All right.
Yeah, that light.
Are you
does look
recording
better.
the local audio?
Yep.
Oh, you are.
Is my
Yes.
volume okay?
Yeah, I
everything's
turned your
perfect.
gain
You
all
hear
the
me
way
all
up. Yeah.
Do you hear it in your headphones?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a pro.
He doesn't mind stewing bread either.
He doesn't mind.
No.
I know you don't. You got
No.
some of that. You got in on that sourdough.
Yeah, I know. I was going hungry, man.
I really think that's a shitty song.
It's not their best.
It's Chris Cornell's worst major song.
Where's major song? I'm trying to think major songs. Yeah, probably.
I
His
think
worst major
definitely.
song?
Yeah.
Like out
worst,
of all of the big singles that he put out, yeah.
even with anybody, with Soundgarden,
Audio Slave,
Audio Slave, anybody.
Temple of the Dog.
Yeah, that means the worst Temple of the Dog song. Like
Yeah.
Say Hello to Heaven is a masterpiece song.
Yeah. Say It All Evans. Fantastic.
Oh, I can't think about the lyrics too much or I get weepy. It's too good.
Please, Mother Mercy.
Yeah, anyway.
Say hello to heaven. I remember after my great grandpa died, I listened to that song a lot
You know what?
in the garage underneath
so-
my apartment building in Cape Town, and I just like cried like a little bitch.
So imagine,
I'm like, Papo, God.
imagine me, my dad's dying of cancer in the hospital, and then I find out Chris Cornell. It was May 16th, 2017. Was like 2.5 weeks before my dad died or something. No, like a month, something like that. And he died. So Bill and I went to do an open mic set. Went back when the open mics at Humpy's used to be
Yeah.
packed, and we did like a full Chris Cornell block.
Oh,
And
really?
all the musicians got emotional about it. He did Say Hello to Heaven, and so it was just it was insane.
Did he do Hunger Strike?
No, he also hates Eddie Vedder. Bill and I are Eddie Vedder haters. But no, during the black,
If you two were to do Hunger Strike, who would be Eddie Vedder?
He
and
would be Eddie Vedder.
Okay.
He would?
I'll
Okay.
tell you this.
I can Cornelisphere pretty well.
You guys
Okay, yeah.
might not be my friends after this, but my college band
Yeah.
in Fairbanks, we were doing. We typically do like one or two covers on our set originals,
Yeah.
and one of the songs that they wanted to do was Hunger Strike,
Uh-huh.
and our singer was a bass baritone, so obviously he was Eddie Vedder.
Yeah.
And he's like, I need someone who can like hit these notes. And I'm like, I'll do it. So I'm like playing bass. And he's like, I'm going hungry. On the back, I'm going hungry. It actually wasn't a bad performance, but yeah, I gotta say,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
It's just a boring song.
It's just a boring
It's boring.
song.
It's not
like
bad.
the whole song is like one giant crescendo.
Oh yeah.
It's like,
But they can do that well. He
and
can
it
do.
gets
Do you know
louder.
Seasons?
Seasons.
Seasons by Chris Cornell. It was from Singles. That song is one giant crescendo, but it's a masterpiece song. It's my number one favorite Chris Cornell song of all time.
So it was a solo track that he released on the Singles album?
The movie
Yeah,
soundtrack, yeah.
Huh. I haven't heard
Yeah,
it.
it's spectacular.
And a song doesn't have to be complicated to be
No,
good.
but it just was boring.
Yeah.
Hunger Strike is just boring,
It is.
especially on that album.
But I still kind of like it.
It's still. I get pumped for the intro.
Yeah.
Like the intro.
And it's just because of like raw nostalgia. Like my dad had
Yeah.
a Temple of the
Yeah.
Dog.
I have it in my
Disc when I was, like-
totaled Saturn wagon.
Yeah. When I was a little kid.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
was like, oh, this is like kind of cool. It's
Yeah.
rock music. My dad likes rock music.
It's not bad.
and then
it's
as I
just
got
boring.
older, I was like, it's not that great.
It's just boring.
But you like it for nostalgia purposes.
yeah,
At
but
least
it's
I
also
do.
it's also just not bad.
Yeah.
But it's Chris Cornell, and I don't want
Lyrically,
not bad.
lyrically is pretty retarded.
It's pretty
Lyrically,
retarded.
it's retarded.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
basically like social justice nonsense.
It is, yeah.
Like 1990.
It's like, yeah.
What's weird is he didn't
I don't
write.
mind stealing bread.
He didn't
from the
write-
mouth of decadence.
Chris Cornell didn't write politically.
No.
really.
Yeah.
So it just was weird. It was just
yeah,
weird.
it was
It
out
didn't-
of, yeah. Chris Cornell's lyrics were very like kind of like. I was thinking about his lyrics as kind of like impressionistic.
oh, of course.
So it's not
That's the
like
word.
it's more of a feeling than like
Yeah.
that explicit message.
I mean, you were what were we talking about? Bones of Birds
yeah.
from like a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
That is an impression.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean anything.
No, but you hear it and you feel it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. It's,
But
it's
Hunger
fantastic.
Strike is like,
He tried too hard.
yeah, it's like
It's like what's the?
like Rage Against the Machine without
morning. I can't even
Yes,
remember the
yeah.
name of his solo album he put out when he
Morning Euphoria.
Morning for. It's horrible.
I didn't listen to that album.
It's not good, and it's him trying too hard.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like no. You're just Chris Cornell.
Was that the first one he
Everyone
released?
loves you already. What are you doing?
Was that the first one he released
After they broke up,
Soundgarden?
yeah. and it tanked
Yeah.
because it's not good.
I haven't listened to
He
it.
needs other people around him.
Yeah. Now that's the thing. Like that was the beauty about Soundgarden is they were all made their own. They all made songs and like helped make them together. So not one guy could just like go off on like a. There's people there to reel them in and be like, you have a good idea here, but let's.
Well, that's the thing about Soundgarden is they all wrote.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is like they all know how to write good songs, and so
they bounce it off
Chris
each other.
Cornell is like, yeah, I'm gonna do something that's like less cool, and then they're like, we
And
like
then
the hook.
becomes an alcoholic.
Yeah, we like the hook, but let's dial it back.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Anyway,
are we
welcome.
live yet?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Welcome to Contra Gentiles season 4 episode whatever. I feel I shouldn't drop the intro, but I don't want to be responsible for the number anymore.
Oh, okay.
I just don't care.
Yeah. Just make up a new
Number 116 or whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah. Or you could just title them at the moment, whatever you feel like.
Hunger Strike with
Episode
Mr.
Hunger Strike.
Mr. Patriarch.
Just check with Mr. Paycheck. Yeah, there we go.
Today we have Mr. Patriarch with us
Indeed,
of Twitter and YouTube fame.
that's right. Big
Yeah.
Lee.
You're the only. What was it you messaged? Did you just message the account page back before I co-opted it? Before I threatened to kill Brian Stelter in real life in his house, and had to co-opt the.
No, yeah, I'm trying to think. So, obviously, for the people listening at home, America, I'm talking to you. Yeah, I heard you guys podcast on Pete Quinones.
Oh yeah.
So I was a subscriber to his still am, to his podcast. I was like, oh. And then I heard you guys like name dropping Alaska in there or some shit. And I'm like, these guys are in Anchorage? I'm like, I thought I was the only one. So, and then at that point I was like, I just found you on Twitter.
Yeah.
And then
In your old account?
Yeah. That was like a year and a half ago. It was before last winter, I thought.
no, it was after I came back from South Africa.
Oh, okay.
So within about a year-ish ago.
Okay.
About a year-ish. Yeah.
Now we met up and hung out. And
Yeah. And then we met up and then we hung out.
talked about recording
Talked about
many
recording.
times, and then you hit me up today, and I'm like, "Do you want to record a podcast?"
Yeah. No, I was intending on enjoying myself this weekend and just like being active.
Well,
and
here
stuff.
you are.
Yeah, here I am. Just enjoyed some sourdough pancakes at Leroy's. I'm feeling very satisfied.
Leroy's.
Leroy's. Very, very good. That's actually the second time I've been there in the past 2 weeks.
Wow.
And before that, I hadn't been in years.
You're Leroy's maxing.
I'm Leroy's maxing. So a friend of mine was coming up from Homer.
Oh,
And then,
you have friends in Homer?
yeah,
Like 10 people live there.
I know. But one of them is my buddy.
Yeah.
And he was up here. His wife had to come up here for some work stuff. I was like, hey, how about we meet up for breakfast?
Oh,
'Cause that worked out with his schedule. And then I was like, his hotel was close to Leroy's. I'm like, Leroy's? And I ate the exact same thing that I ate tonight because it's that good.
dang. Have you been to Homer?
Homer? Unfortunately.
I've never been to Homer.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Whatever, man. Homer's great.
This is like a boat launch, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm getting so much sense. I'm like choking on my whiskey here. Man,
He's upset.
I love Homer, man.
Yeah.
We also love Alaska.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I do at least.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
True man of the North. Yeah.
No, not me.
No.
Yeah. Well, that would make sense. I mean, the model minority over here.
What do you think it is?
About Alaska that I don't like?
No, that people there are people who are made for it and people who aren't. And just knowing you at all, you're made for it.
Yeah.
Like even if I
Yeah.
didn't know you here, you just are made for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It might just be.
Because I'm like,
I actually,
I'm like,
I actually no clue.
Hatred of
Yeah.
groups of people.
It might be. Yeah. I mean, do you hate certain groups of people?
No, I just
You don't have any.
no because the thing
You're
is,
not
okay,
registered on any lists
I'm
that
not
would lead
registered
you to
on any
flee
lists. No, and
civilized society.
no,
Society.
and I think okay. So part of the reason is that so a lot of people move to Alaska for economic reasons.
Uh-huh.
Plain and simple.
Yeah.
Because it is a good place to make money. But my family mostly moved here. Like my great grandparents moved up here. At least half of them, mostly because they liked it. I'm serious. Like they got up here during World War II, and they're like, this place rules. And then they went back to wherever they came from, and then they're like trying to, get great grandma to move up here.
Yeah.
And then they did. And so I don't know, like whatever made my great grandparents like it in the first place,
just caught
I
that.
still like it.
You just inherited whatever.
Yeah, I just inherited it. So like,
because my family didn't especially. I don't think they were just here.
Right. Yeah.
Like if my mom's family hadn't suffered great tragedies in the 90s, she wouldn't be here. I don't think.
yeah.
She had no
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah.
If my family wasn't running away from INS and stuff, I mean, they would not have been here.
They're not sending their best. Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
but no, yeah, a lot of people, people come up here for a lot of reasons. Like, and originally with them, it was military.
Yeah.
So they got stationed up
Well,
here
the-
during World War II.
like-
And then, like
yeah.
I said, they liked it.
Yeah.
So after the war was over, then they moved up
Right.
not too much long later. So.
Well, like the one thing I said it in a podcast before, but the one thing I really have noticed being born here and mostly raised here was that there's a handful of reasons why people come to Alaska. The first one I've always heard many times is military. The second one is working in the oil field.
Yep.
And the third one is
sex offenses.
Yeah, and the third one's because they're running away from shit, right? It could be sex offense, it could be another felony, it could be divorce, it could be a breakup.
I think my grandfather moved
Yeah.
here because he was having alcohol issues, and it
Yeah.
kind of removed him.
Yep. Yeah, and then that's really the only three reasons. I think I've only met about 4 people in my life where they say they came up here just because they always wanted to come and they weren't running away from anything.
Yeah.
And sometimes
But
it
that
makes
to me just sounds like a dream you have as a 5-year-old.
Yes,
You just
yeah.
Never.
yes, yeah. Or it makes me think that they're lying, that they're holding something back. It's like, no, you're running away from
You're
something.
like, wait, what's your middle name?
They're all Jesse Pinkman, basically.
yeah.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, Alaska's was a weird place that way. I mean, I can't say that I hate it. I've lived
I don't.
I've lived in a lot of places now that I could say there's some things I do enjoy about Alaska.
Because there's things I viscerally hate,
But there's also things that,
like this winter.
yes.
Viscerally hate it. I hate snow.
Like, being down in the
Oppression
south,
from
being
the sky.
down in the southeast,
God
I would
hates
rather
us.
live like in Juneau
Yeah.
Oh,
Juneau's
yeah.
nice.
and Ketchikan or, what was the last place I went to? Sitka, Ketchikan. Those places are just beautiful. And it's warmer. I could walk around during the winters. Yeah, everything about it is beautiful.
Yeah.
But
No, Southeast is great. I had a grandpa who's from there, and it is a nice place, but there you go.
Sorry.
I'm not used to this
I was
mic
going to
thing,
see
man.
if I didn't have to say anything or not.
Scooch forward a little bit. There
you're
we go.
good,
Now I
you're
can
good.
lean back and pick
Be
up
on the
the
mic. Yeah, you're good.
pro audio. There we
Yeah.
go. How's that?
Yeah.
Is that good?
You feel
Dynamite.
SM57?
Nice.
Or
I do.
SM7B, not 57. We're not peasants. 57s.
Anyways, so what's going on, boys?
do you have any topic today?
No, I actually hadn't. I was at work, doing nothing, as one does at most jobs now.
Just reading about the AIDS patients.
Yeah. Sifting through medical records.
Yes, yeah. So this person
At
has
my leisure,
syphilis.
be like, I wonder what this person.
Chlamydia.
Stop.
He's like, I'm drinking.
I am. I'm trying not to laugh and like choke on this 80 proof dragon piss.
He's like, don't remind me, man. That burns so bad.
Yeah, it burns so bad. So I've been told.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was wondering, like, kind of where my podcasting stamina is going.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I just kind of happened upon the thought that literally nothing fundamentally interesting is happening anymore in the world. I think it's this kind of repeat
Right, yeah.
over and over. Biden can only say so many dumb things before it's not funny anymore.
How about AOC?
Wow.
Doesn't do anything
Bitches
for you.
wilding out. Really?
She's crazy. Yeah. No, I feel you. But I don't know about you guys, but for me personally, I feel like we're on the cusp of something.
Yes, it feels like
It feels like
It feels like nothing's
really
happening, and then the dam will break.
Yeah, like something's going to happen. Like it feels soon-ish.
Yeah.
Like within the next decade, like
Yeah.
shit's gonna go down. But
Oh yeah.
I just
100%.
like in between now and then, I'm like, I don't know. I just
There's a staleness right now to the news cycle,
yeah,
to things happening,
Yeah.
even in town. It just feels kind of like
yeah.
there's nothing to be learned from anything anymore because it's the same thing that's been happening for a couple years now.
That's true.
Yeah.
I guess the only because I'm trying to think about news. What is it? The Chinese balloon.
Yeah, I'm like,
Right.
okay. I think
I guess
that's kind of hilarious.
The only thing internationally that was kind of significant was the. Did you guys hear about what was it? Seymour Hersh put out an article.
Who's that?
He's a journalist, and I think he's for the New York Times.
Yeah.
And he basically put out a piece where he's like, "Yeah, Washington destroyed the Nord Stream 2 pipeline to Germany, so they like sabotaged it."
The bomb thing?
Yeah.
That blew, remember the thing in the water that blew
Yeah.
up?
So it's like, and
Oh, he just
basically-
outed them as having done it.
Yeah, and then the regime is like,
Shocking.
yeah, I know. And that's the thing. Like, I know, like, okay, YouTube, I believe everything that the federal government says, but you must admit, it's kind of strange that a country with the means, motive, and opportunity was the one to blow it up. So, I don't know. I feel like
Who knows? Who's to know?
yeah, who's to know? But one thing that's really interesting, though, is just it's less the domestic politics because, like, domestic politics to me has always been kind of, or at least for quite a long time, been kind of mundane. The only politics stuff that sort of like interests me is like the meta politics. So, like, how does power actually work, and sort of like what is the paradigm that we're in,
Yeah.
and how is it changing, and how could it change?
Yeah.
That's the sort of stuff that I find
I just don't think any change is happening right now, this second.
yeah.
It just
but-
feels very much the same.
It really does feel though that whatever order existed after communism of like American, hegemony or whatever, that's cracking up. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
think it's pretty obvious. Like with the war in Ukraine and everything, bombing critical infrastructure of like allied countries. It's like, when you're doing that, you got to really wonder about the lifespan of this thing. Like how tenable is it?
Not.
It's not. Like, I mean, the regime seems pretty interested in, obviously like maintaining their power and control and stuff. But on the other hand, like, they're not sending their best. And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
obvious. Like, if you compare, like, who was in the executive branch, like 50 years ago to today,
Yeah.
I mean, they're not even the same species,
No.
basically. So it's like, it's just sort of sputtering along and like going off of inertia.
Yeah.
But
I think
what's
it has
gonna
been
happen?
for a long time.
yeah, it has. Like again, like ever since like, the USSR collapsed,
Yeah.
and like all the serious people, or a lot of them, just basically left. They're like, oh, we don't have to worry about this anymore. We're gonna go like be rich and like do private sector stuff.
No.
But yeah, I don't know. So I don't know, man. It's interesting, but yeah, in my own life, yeah. And this is kind of like, it's funny you brought this up because on my own channel, I put out a video a little while ago, or
Yeah.
like message, and I'm like, yeah, it's just like politics. I don't know. Like, I feel like I didn't really know where to go with my YouTube channel either for the same reason.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of the stuff that needs to be said has already been said. A lot of it is sort of self-evident at this point about what reality is. And it's like, okay, so what do I focus on now? That's like of value. So like my last episode I did was on how to talk to girls and get them to like you. That's literally what I did.
Yeah.
So it was like love line episode.
Nice.
Because, a lot of the
You're just interacting with your audience. You're
yeah,
just-
because a lot of the, young dudes or whatever, they're just like,
we're very aware.
yeah, they're very, basement dweller types, or they have like a
Yeah.
job, but they're totally socially inept, and they're like hypergamy, gynocentrism, and I'm like, yeah, all that's true, but why do you have to be a loser? was basically it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Like I'm feeling more that sort of stuff these days.
No, I agree. I think it's just
like
Yeah.
how to make your life better, how to make where you live a better place. Because at the end of the day, like Washington's going to do what it's going to do.
Yeah. It
You
doesn't
know?
matter.
And so the only thing you really can do is like build wealth, power, and influence
In my house.
in your own area, in your house. It starts in the home. Yes. Build wealth, power, and influence in your own area. Get yourself set up so that you and people who think like you, where you live, can
What are you looking at?
help.
Did you plug something in here?
No.
Okay.
Why?
Something popped up.
It's the feds.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Help execute mutually shared objectives and values. So that's basically it.
No, I thought you were telling that to the feds. Is that a lot for you?
Ooh, yeah.
That's my normal.
It's your normal. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't had whiskey in a long time.
I don't get hungover. Well, I don't drink, just drinking straight whiskey, nothing else. I don't get hungover.
Must be nice.
You know Slurp Gang?
I've heard of them.
Tangentially. The
Yeah,
only time I've
tangentially,
ever
yeah.
blacked out. The first time I ever blacked out was recording with Slurp Gang. Oh yeah.
And was it
I
with
remember
this-
being being like, I fell asleep on the couch.
asleep on the couch.
I was like, what?
Yeah. No,
Did
that
you, did you listen back to it? Like, did
No,
you
they
say
never
anything
released
crazy?
it.
Oh, they did. Did it probably go pretty bad?
No, you know Derek, our
Yeah.
producer friend.
Yeah.
I bet he would love to hear me call him that. But he and I got really, really blitzed, like really blitzed, and it just
okay.
evolved into.
He was part of Slurpee?
No.
okay.
We're just in the same group of friends.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It just evolved into him and I talking about how we ran the show now and we were the only funny ones. Like, we were just dunking on everybody. And it just turned into the Derek and Grant show because we were so belligerent.
Yeah.
And then a couple of the
alcohol fueled arrogance. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fantastic. It's probably the best thing they ever recorded, but a couple of them just didn't want to
Release it.
No, no. This isn't good. This isn't a good
like,
podcast.
no. This is the best one. This is what it's called. Slurp Gang.
Slurp.
What are you slurping?
Yeah.
Drinks or dick?
Was that their motto?
Drink.
No,
Slurp Gang. What are they exactly? Because
They're
I know
gone.
I've
It's
heard-
over.
It's over.
like a year, 8 months ago.
Oh.
Was that the one with Ace in it, right?
Yeah, the anarchist.
Yeah, yeah.
The anarchist.
Oh.
the
that guy on
collab-
Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah, that was it died in the wake of that catastrophe. The social breakdown.
Yeah.
So they
Jeremy and I always find ourselves at the center of every social fracture on Twitter. We're somehow central players in all of it.
Yeah.
So don't make friends with us online.
No, that's good.
We will fracture, we will sever half of your friendships
It's true.
by existing alone.
But I will say we're very ecumenical here. We got 2 Catholics,
I was going to say.
1 Orthodox here.
It's like, oh, getting
We're
Jeremy
healing the schism today.
Yes.
to teach you to cross yourself the correct way. We start fist fighting immediately.
Yeah.
That's how long
Just
the ecumenicism.
the correct way.
I remember the first time I saw an Orthodox cross himself.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, bro, what are you doing?
Wait, how do the Catholics do it?
A cross
Okay.
instead of,
Yeah, so it's this chest, right shoulder, left shoulder.
no, it's you drag it across your body. Yeah,
Sorry.
it's the other way. Yeah.
I'm stuck.
Do you do the 5 fingers?
No, you do the 3.
The
So
3?
you got the Trinity in one.
Okay.
You got
Oh, do you have
Christ-
to stick your fingies out?
No.
Okay.
So you got Christ's divine and human nature unified in one. And you got this.
Yeah.
And then you go forehead, chest, right
Shoulders.
shoulder, left shoulder.
Is it across the chest for Catholics or on the shoulders? Do you know? Either.
Either, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
they're
You're crossing the middle somehow.
yes, yeah.
Now, the old believers
Yeah.
do it like this.
Yes, I've seen.
So
what was the
that's
thing that I
different.
figured out?
So
What was
that's
the
like Christ crucified.
ICXC
Oh, right, yeah.
thing
yeah,
that I
yeah.
figured out that you
Yeah.
see in like old iconography?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what they're doing. The old believers are they're trying to mimic
We're old
that
believers.
wave.
What does that mean?
So the old believers are like a sect of. They're basically imagine like the tradcasts of orthodoxy.
Okay. I think of all Orthodox as the tradcasts of Orthodoxy, so you'll have to You'll have to explain.
So, okay.
I imagine on a practical level.
Let me phrase it.
Yeah.
The sedevacantists of Orthodoxy.
Oh,
Let's put it like that. So
the Orthodox Church is not the real one, and the old one died. Or,
kind of, yeah. So,
they would figure out a way to kind of legalistically tell you they're not saying that, but they are.
yeah. So they're very similar to the Orthodox in most ways, but there was like a changing the sign of the cross to sort of what the Greeks were doing, which is the way that I did it, was like anathema to them. And then there was also, they changed like some liturgical practices a little bit. And then they're like, this is heresy. And then,
But they're not schismatic.
So they were schismatic for a long time. But then in the 1900s, the Patriarch of Moscow was like, all right, guys, like, whatever, there's misunderstandings. You guys, it's not heretical due to the sign of the cross the way you do it. It's fine. But, like, we can be a team. And then, but the old believers are like, no, we don't want to be.
So it's kind of a
we don't want to be part of
halfway.
your, yeah. So, like, if you were an old believer and you, for some reason, went to, like, a regular Orthodox church, I think you could take communion there. But it wouldn't work the other way. Because the old believers would be like, you're not like really Orthodox like us.
So like SSPX a little bit.
Yeah.
This sounds SSPXy to me.
It does, yeah.
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 It's basically like that.
Yeah. Matt Fradd did an episode with a canon lawyer who went through the whole SSPX thing and essentially was like, they're still schismatic.
Yeah.
This kind of explained it legally.
Right, yeah.
Because everybody knows.
Right, yeah.
They're like, well, actually, the Second Vatican Council was a whatever kind of council. It wasn't a doctrinal. It wasn't a doctrinal council.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, what's a council? Are we now inventing different kinds of council?
Yeah, I know. No, yeah.
Actually, nothing they said is binding at a council.
Because he didn't specifically say he's speaking from the chair. So it's...
Well, he's
Okay.
spoken ex cathedra twice. So, what's the line here?
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's all nonsense until it's ex cathedra. Yes, I don't know.
Okay, so almost none of it
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
Because the thing with the ex cathedra statements, if I understand this correctly, so ever since that became...
Was that the First Vatican? That was
Yes.
ex cathedra?
I think
Or the
I can't
papal
remember,
infallibility one, yeah. That's where they added the ex cathedra thing.
Yeah.
But since then, there has only been two
Yes.
ex cathedra statements.
Yeah.
Now, you could argue about what was ex cathedra prior to that,
Yeah.
what was from the chair, what wasn't from the chair. But since then, there's been two.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was, what was it? It was the Immaculate Conception
Yes.
and,
Bodily Assumption
Oh.
of Mary. It was Bodily Assumption.
yeah, and the Assumption of Mary.
The assumption, yeah.
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 So, but anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. The trads, they're fun.
Are they ruining orthodoxy in the same way that trads?
So not the old
ruining-
believers, just because they're such a small,
Oh, okay.
and they're only in Russia.
Oh,
So they're like in the rest of the Orthodox world, like
They just don't
Romanians are
exist.
like, what? Old believers?
yeah.
Greeks? What? Old believers?
Armenians.
Armenia, yeah. So they're like, old believers. So it doesn't, it's more of a thing that happened within Russia itself, where you had this issue. But yeah, I guess sort of with Orthodoxy online, the main problem is you just have like just like very hostile spurgs
So the
like-
same thing.
yeah, who
It's-
just-
I would imagine it's exactly
who
the
wanna-
same problem.
who want to fight about like, every like little
And who
detail.
are not actually that in touch with what's happening in
Yeah.
the real world.
Yeah.
Well, I think I don't know if it's the same in Orthodoxy, but I would assume it is. But I know in the Catholic world, a lot of those people are converts.
Yeah.
A lot of them come from converts
Most of these people do seem to be, yeah.
Yeah, they come conversion from Protestantism normally, and it's almost as if it's more comfortable for them to deny the Pope still while claiming that they're Catholic, and it seems like that's really where it comes.
Oh, you're
down
talking
to.
about Catholics.
Yeah, like the
Like the trads.
yes,
whatever,
the ones who
Taylor Farchel.
yes, basically the ones who
I won't call him.
Was he a
doctor.
convert?
Oh,
Yes, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. He was
hardcore.
Protestant, yeah.
Very obviously.
I actually think he even was a minister. I think he was like all in
Wasn't
Protestantism.
he?
Yeah.
Was he Episcopalian?
Something like that, yeah.
Episcopalian?
Yeah.
Anglican. He was Anglican.
Yeah,
Was he Anglican?
yeah. Episcopalians
Something
are
like
like American Anglicans.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And
I think.
right. And so I think it allows them to admit basic historical facts about the origin of the church, so they don't feel as if they're completely heretical like a Protestant is, but while simultaneously rejecting the Pope still.
They're like, but Francis.
Yeah, but they're doing it by saying that he's a heretic, and so I don't know if yeah, because I've spoken about it before in a podcast as well, and it wasn't until I guess now it's been a year ago, like last year, when I first encountered Eastern Orthodox converts, and most of them are American converts, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I have, I've lived in Europe. I've spoken to like actual Russians who were raised in the Orthodox Church and everything. And I've never spoken with people that had such animosity towards Catholics the way that the converted American Eastern Orthodox do. And I wonder if a lot of it is the same thing. So a lot of the Protestants who convert to Catholicism still want to hate the Pope, and they want to still hold on to some kind of protesting against the church. And it seems to me like a lot of the Protestants who also convert to Eastern Orthodoxy is for similar reasons. It's that it gives them an in the reality of apostolic succession while simultaneously still holding a negative view of the Pope. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know what you mean. I don't think it's that so much. What I think it is they have, and it's the same thing with like the Orthodox Spurs or like the Trads or whatever.
Yeah.
In Catholicism, is they have like in their mind like an idea that of what the church is, and how it's totally perfect, and like this is the most base thing in the world, and I'm joining Pope Urban II Catholicism now.
That's what a lot of the converts are Trentians.
Yeah. And
Into Catholicism.
and then they actually join it and they realize like, no, that's not really how it works. And you have to, and if you're going to become Catholic, either don't become Catholic or like you gotta like take the whole thing.
Yes. Yeah.
And then
so
they
that's what
get,
sacrifice
and so they
is.
join it with these sort of like presuppositions about what Catholicism should be in their own heads, or Orthodoxy should be in their own heads.
Yeah.
And when they actually encounter it in real life, they're like, this isn't what I wanted,
Yeah.
but it's still correct. But I'm really mad about this. And then so it's a very, I don't know. They have sort of like delusions about kind of what the religion is before they join it. And then instead of not joining or just being like, I was wrong, or I need to just keep my mouth shut and like get with it, they need to be like scolding the whole time.
Yeah.
So
Right. And I guess what I meant by that is that when you think about most Protestant sects, and I can't say all of them because there's so many of them that I don't know, but when you think of like the most popular ones that we encounter on a day-to-day basis, the appeal of it is the fact that they are their own interpreter of scriptures.
Yeah.
They're their own interpreter of moral understanding within that's found in scriptures and so on and so forth. So they are their own pope.
Yeah.
And this is what I mean is that when you have that same mentality going into the church that has an actual hierarchy, you in some way still want to combat that because you want to be your own pope. And so when you hear someone like Dr. Marshall Taylor talk, it is as if he thinks he is the authority in what the church's teachings are. And he wants to hold that so much to the point that it's like that it doesn't matter whether a cardinal tells him, a bishop tells him, or the fucking pope tells him, he's right.
Yeah.
He is still the authority of what scripture means, on what the magisterium of the church is, and so on. So yeah.
except instead of it's me and my Bible and the Holy Spirit, it's like he's like it's me and my papal encyclicals.
Yes,
and
exactly.
the Holy Spirit is telling me that.
Yes, yeah.
No, it is a similar sort of thing.
And that's what I really noticed is that they remain in the same mode of Protestantism, but now with accepting I guess the history. It seems like the history aspect, whether one converts to Orthodoxy or Catholicism, is what becomes indisputable. Like you would have to literally make up your own history to accept Protestantism as it is. Because you would have, I've said it many times, but I'll say it again. It's like you have to say that every Christian was doing Christianity wrong for 1,500 years. Like that has to be the position of a Protestant, and that there's this guy Martin Luther who was inspired by God in some way, but is not a prophet, but was inspired by God to change the church to the right direction,
to reform it.
Yeah, to put it where it was.
Get it back on track.
Yes, yeah. But even though in the end it was never really on track. Because they can't say it was ever on track because there was no point in the early church where there was like sola scriptura. No. There was no point. There was nothing that they teach was ever found in early church. So basically, it's almost like the Joseph Smith argument. It's like there was a person that was
Joseph Smithization.
Yeah. Yes, it was like in some way had a special relationship to the truth and God. At least they have balls enough to call him a prophet. But the Protestants don't. But he's not a prophet. He was a prophetic figure, non-prophet, right? non-prophet, prophetic.
He was a providential figure, not a prophetic figure. Yeah.
And, but that is a position. So historically, it doesn't really hold up because you would have to be like, okay, well, that just never really existed. And so. And so I think because of that, when they're encountered with historical arguments, I found that to be the most powerful arguments that most Protestants, when they do convert, that they just, that's what gets them thinking many times.
That's why I couldn't be a Protestant anymore.
Yes, yeah.
And that was, but I guess in fairness to my Protestant friends, and I have many, I think a lot, and this isn't trying to sound like I'm being a condescending dick or anything, but I feel like a lot of them, they don't know what they don't know.
Oh, of course.
You know what I mean? So like in their minds, like early Christianity really was like Pastor Billy Bob's Baptist, congregation in the strip mall with like their Bible and led by the Holy Spirit. And that was how it is. And that they literally think, because that's what I thought like Christianity was. Like I thought it was just like believers gathering together, and like Jesus is Lord. And then, sometime around Constantine, like I got hierarchical and weird. And then, then it was changed after that. And then, then it went back on track. So I think a lot of them, they don't even, they have a very ignorant understanding about what early Christianity was. Yeah. And that's the problem. And so it's not that they're like making bad faith arguments. It's just they're plainly just kind of ignorant about, what early Christianity was. And so
no, I would agree with that.
I take it easy on them because, I was there and I understand. And I think with most people, with most things, it's like that. Yeah. It's not just religion. It's like, whatever it is, it's like politics, it's like understanding about like, history, like, if you're taught, you get your public school education and whatnot. That's actually a good analogy. Like, you think about like the Civil War is a good one. Yeah. Like, the North just wanted to free the slaves and South wanted to, we're just mean. They were just mean and they wanted to, imprison or hold on to slaves because they just hated black people. And you actually read the history about it, you're like, actually it's a lot more complicated than that. And then
the North was actually aggressive.
Yeah, and then you realize like the North didn't really give a shit if like the South had slaves or not. They just wanted them in the Union paying most of the taxes.
Yes, yeah.
And then you're like, oh, but your whole life you were taught that it was, just this, and you just accepted it because that's what, your social authorities told you. And I think it's the same thing too with like evangelicals or whatever.
Well, you see, this is the part that maybe I sound too harsh on it, but the biggest difficulty, and this is true about both of you, is that but you both are not still Protestant. Why?
No, I agree.
Right, because
I'm on the meaner side of I'm not. You're much nicer.
Because in the end of the day, so, one One has to be willfully ignorant at that point.
Well, because
I think there is-
It's right.
It.
So that's why I think it is in bad faith, because there has to come a time when you investigate. And when you begin to investigate, either you're going to turn a blind eye and be like, I just don't want to know, which then it won't be in good faith anymore.
Yeah.
But I don't think there could ever. I don't think anybody in the Western world with the information age, with everything, could honestly say in good faith that they just didn't know. I could see that maybe in a third world country where they don't have it, but you say, I'm
really
80.
to the South.
Yeah, but still, but you
Or
say,
the
I'm
Valley.
80 years old. I'm 80 years
Anywhere in
old.
Georgia.
I'm 80 years old, and I never care to investigate something as simple as history.
Yeah.
I would say it's hard for me to believe that can actually exist.
We're also a lot more smarter and industrious than most people. So
And that's the thing. That's
I don't
I think you're
I
actually being
recognize-
too charitable in that way. I
Yeah,
think
so in a certain-
you're giving people too much
in a
credit.
certain yeah, and I think this is where, like, I recognize. This is going to sound bad, but
Yeah.
I'll say it. Most people are essentially cattle, and
We love
when-
cattle.
we love cows. We love cattle. I want them to be happy. I want them, grass fed. No GMOs, pasture. Yeah, great. But the problem is that once I sort of recognize that, and it's true of most things, and this is sort of where you could tie it into the politics or whatever. Like, people are just totally blinkered. Like, they'll believe whatever authority they think is legitimate tells them. Period. Whether it's the teacher, the pastor, the media, whatever.
Whoever their authority figure
Whoever
is, yeah.
they trust to tell them the truth. And those people who tell them the truth, a lot of them are also kind of that way, though a little less so. So it's I've talked to people who, I tell them a little bit about Orthodoxy, and they have like no idea. They're like, "What?" So, like, that's what you believe about communion? Oh, and it's the same. And I'm sure it would be the same thing too if I had a conversation with them about Catholicism. They're like, weird. I never. And the thought like literally never crossed their minds because they thought they were doing it right the whole time, and then they were never like actually presented with an argument. They just assume it's correct, and so they just
And most
they're
Catholics
creatures
and,
of pattern.
and most
I think-
Catholics and Orthodox are also kind of cattle-y, as you described. So it's not like most of those people are prepared to argue
yes,
effectively.
yeah.
yeah.
And I think it's and I
like
think
the
it's
everyday parishioner. They're not all theologians. No. And I absolutely get that, but I guess I still can't believe it because I don't think it takes that much intelligence.
It doesn't. But people believe things for more than just rational reasons.
Yes, and again, this is where I think then it becomes bad.
And then
faith.
at that point, it's like,
because it
okay,
becomes a desire.
Even if they're
my
not being
whole
consciously
identity.
malicious.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm the devil guy gonna get Jesus. No, I think it's a very real fact that emotionally it's too hard for them to look at it.
Yeah.
It's like they encounter it into some capacity. Because it was early on when I talked about it was when Anne Marie, and she also got a little bit upset when I was saying this.
Yeah.
But it was like, because I truly believe this absolutely about pastors. I could imagine a scenario where somebody is just they're not called parishioners. What are Protestants called? Just congregates. That there are congregates who are truly ignorant.
Sister Betty Sue.
Yes.
She's
that,
like, oh,
that
praise the
don't
Lord.
that don't have the capacity to even understand basic history. I could imagine that.
there's a lot of, and that's the
Yeah.
thing too. Like, I've met a lot of, church people, and a lot of them, just like everybody else, are pretty simple people.
Yes.
Simple-minded. I mean,
Yeah.
like not bright.
Yeah.
And then I'm not knocking them. I'm just saying that's just a
Right,
fact.
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh, Pastor so-and-so is great. And, I love the Lord and blah, blah, blah. And
It's not like they do no good. It's not-
yeah.
Yeah,
So
but
they're just, they're
but
not,
then
they're
again-
not an investigative type. But I would say,
Okay, but
with your
yeah,
pastor thing,
yeah.
I am in more agreement because they actually have to go to seminary
Yes,
and like
yeah.
study this stuff. And then
They
they're
have
like,
to, yeah.
How do you study anyone but
Yeah.
Luther and Zwingli
Yeah.
and stuff?
I know.
Because
weird.
like then the other thing that gets to me is like, did you watch Clarence Thomas's documentary? when he documents how his father converted to Catholicism, it was just, this is what I mean, that it doesn't take that much. He was illiterate, right? You know, slavery. I mean, you talk about like his grandfather was an actual liberated slave, right? He didn't know how to read, not to write. He heard of some scriptures, and he was Protestant, obviously at that point. He kept going to the services, he heard some stuff, things didn't sound right. And then he went to the Catholic Church, started investigating it, just not in a great intellectual manner. But then he was like, "Oh,
hey,
this
Father,
is."
so
But
This is right, yes.
there are huge portions of the South where there are no Catholic churches.
Yes,
especially
right,
like 50 years ago.
But what I am saying is that back then, still,
Yeah.
you're talking about a very, very ignorant, non-intellectual individual who still was able to discover the truth without that much.
Because the reason I actually agree with both of you.
Yeah.
And I don't think your points are mutually exclusive
No, I don't
at
think so
all.
either.
'Cause, you have the, like when you were converting, and then the Orthodox concept of God and the Catholic concept of God are pretty much exactly the same thing.
Yeah, they're very similar.
Like there's some verbiage difference and stuff. They're very, very similar.
Yeah.
Like your sacraments wouldn't be valid in cases of emergencies if you didn't have the right concept of God. But if I'm engaged in an open and engaged and good faith conversation with a Protestant, and they allow me to walk them through the fact that they define the nature of God differently in every way, that doesn't spur anything for them.
Right,
Like
yeah.
you like this is what you think God is. Like, you explain the ensumum God, the personal God, the idea of a God with boundaries as kind of a big guy, a big spirit.
Yeah.
Fundamentally. And you go, well, actually we conceive of God as like the act of being itself. And you like walk them through everything that means and implies. And they just go, oh, interesting. And like nothing, no, they don't.
Oh, so it's like the
Nothing,
Force.
like nothing fires after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I would agree, because I do think that begins.
Ooh, this is pretty good.
For boxed wine, I always say
That's not bad box wine.
Yeah.
I got another one.
I do think that once you start getting to that theology that way, it does get a little more complex, and I get why it doesn't move them at all.
Yeah, because most people aren't moved by that.
Yes,
But to me, that
for you, yes, because you're somebody who's inclined
And it was
to.
the
then
same
I
thing for
understand, but
me.
it's why it would, to me, it should just cease any comment they have to make about Catholics or Orthodox,
because they don't even get it.
because they just don't get it.
Yes.
Like,
No, I agree with you
everything
there,
you
yeah.
think about confession is not true. Everything.
Yes. Yeah.
And they're like, well, it's still dumb. And I'm like, you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
We just walked through the fact that you don't know what confession is
Right. Yeah.
at all. You have no concept.
And when you discuss it with those people, I mean, do you ever get an inkling that in any way it's in good faith? Maybe you do. For me, to me it seems like they just shut you out. They want to believe what they want to believe. It's more comfortable, and it's too hard to face any opposition from a comfortable belief that they have, because within their churches they have deep community ties. They have everything. Everything about their life was tied to these Protestant little churches. That to then begin to question, I think, is too daunting for them.
Yeah.
And I think once the emotion gets in the way that way, it's not a good faith argument anymore. It's an emotional one.
Yep. No, I would essentially agree with
That
that.
happened with my mom. She said, what if the questions are too much for her faith to handle or something?
Yes,
She
yeah.
said that verbatim.
Yes.
It's like, oh, okay, well, that's
Honest.
the end of the line. Now.
Yeah. But at that point, then there's no more discussion to be had.
No.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. Like you say, it gets caught up in like their whole idea about what reality is.
Yeah.
And what they believe and their character and like how they should conduct themselves and their social ties and their heritage and all this sort of stuff. It is a big deal to like be like, oh, that's mostly wrong. or at least, or
Yeah.
maybe it's mostly correct, but is wrong in some very important ways.
Okay.
And
yeah,
for them, it's like, ooh,
Right, yeah.
And you're right. I think it is sort of like an emotional thing at a certain level where they just like, because at a certain point that actually does kind of become an existential crisis.
Of
of
course,
course, of
yeah.
course.
yeah.
And then there,
And
and
I don't want to trivialize,
which is why,
that,
I mean, and for like me, I was fairly, pretty convinced of orthodoxy for some time, but then like actually, and I think you kind of went through a similar thing, Grant,
Yeah.
like actually like committing to being baptized.
Yeah.
It's a big step.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, all right, I am like signing up for it, and this is it. And like, I gotta change the way I run my life in some fundamental ways in order to be a part of this. And, like mentally you can, believe this sort of stuff, but actually like going through with it is a big step.
Of course.
And,
Because you're doing it at that point.
exactly.
You're
You're
not just-
doing it
you're
at
not
that
just
point. You're
thinking
not
about it.
just, which is also one of the things that's always funny about like the internet Orthodox Spurgs. A lot of them I think are just like inquirers. They're not even like baptized.
Yeah.
They're
What's
just
do you guys have catechumens? is what you
we
call
got
them?
catechumens.
Yeah.
So
You see in their Twitter bio, it was like Orthodox catechumen.
or
After like
or Orthodox inquirer. Yeah.
yeah,
Because
they'll
the
be like- it'll say like anarcho-capitalist,
yeah.
and then
Orthodox
Orthodox catechumen or something
yeah,
yeah.
afterward. It's like, oh, okay, you're one of those.
So
You find the Orthodox icons aesthetically appealing. What are you doing?
talking to J Dog.
You keep talking here.
J-Dog.
Something just keeps popping up. I don't know why it's popping up, so it's fine.
I actually had
Ads.
the conversation with Anne Marie earlier today. Is the vast
Lonely
difference.
pop up on your computer. Bloop. Lonely women in Anchorage want to meet you.
He's like, I gotta go. But I was talking with Anne Marie earlier today about the wild difference in Catholic and Eastern Orthodox iconography. Like they look totally different.
They do. But
Yeah.
I will say some Russian iconography
Yeah.
is kind of like in the middle.
Oh, okay. So it's a little less rigid.
Yeah. But typically, it does look like
Because I looked it up, and apparently there's like strict guidelines about how everything is supposed to be
Right, yeah.
painted. Like no one can be showing any emotion. You can't depict shadow in any way.
Yep.
Because what? Because they're supposed to be in heaven, and there's no shadow in heaven. or
I'm
something.
not exactly sure like the nitty gritties of the
Like every color has to be according to something. Everybody has to be wearing a certain
yeah,
color.
yeah.
there's
That's the
no
symbology for-
there's no horizon in the backgrounds because it's supposed to reflect the infinite.
Yeah.
Certain body parts are exaggerated a little bit for like the eyes to like see and
Yeah.
stuff like
Yeah,
that.
but I didn't know that.
Hear the ears, hear the word of
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I just thought I just was wanted to know why it looked like that because it's very, very
Very distinct.
rigid in its how it's presented in
Oh,
every icon I've ever seen.
But I think as
And that appeals to some people.
it does.
I find it extremely boring and aesthetically unappealing. Personally,
yeah.
like it really does not. But I also have I don't have any emotional investment in like Eastern
Aesthetics.
aesthetics at all.
Yeah.
Because like Eastern Catholics do the same thing.
Of
Like,
course,
they have
yeah,
they have there's a similar draw
Yeah.
to
They do
like
the-
kind of a
they do the
very
same
prescribed.
Iconographic representation. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's true. But if you look at early Christian, if you look at the earliest preserved icons in Christianity, they look like that.
Like, well, they're Byzantine, right?
Yeah.
Well, that was literally what painting was then. Mm-hmm. They weren't like it wasn't done that way.
But I mean the specific style
yeah,
of the iconography. So like, the way, like the ways that the icons were created with those sort of characteristics that
Yeah.
you're talking about, which
Yeah.
separates it from conventional painting,
yeah,
existed like a long time ago, like pre-schism. So
of
like,
course, of course.
So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
those early icons are also Catholic icons, in addition to being Orthodox.
Exact. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's.
yeah.
But I just like painting just kind of looked more like that than it does now. Like painting technique hadn't developed nearly as much in like the 800s and 900s. Like
I'm trying to think.
just art looked kind of more like that.
No,
It
it
looked
did.
kind of flatter. They hadn't developed art theory nearly as much. They didn't
That's true.
Right,
have
yeah.
a concept of space and depth in the.
Mm.
They didn't-
But even then, if you look at like a mosaic of Justinian,
yeah.
and then you compare it to an icon at the same time, they do look very different
Yes,
because there is a specific style.
there is a quality to
There
it
is a
that's
quality.
specific.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes them different from like, let's call it secular art of the
Yeah.
day.
Because it looks looks old to me. I mean, obviously Eastern iconography looks old,
Yeah, yeah.
but it looks ancient
Yep,
by nature of the style alone. It just looks old.
it does,
Yeah.
which I like.
Yeah, and it just personally does nothing for me.
Yeah, well,
Which it's a matter of taste.
yeah.
Icons are
Right.
icons.
Yeah, and you can have like statues and stuff in the church, but they're not. Like I saw like a image.
That
the
is a
other-
thing, right? Because like you guys don't have statues nearly as much.
Well, yeah, not nearly as much, but you can have them. I don't think they're not. There's no like prohibition on statues. I don't think. And again, I'm not speaking as an expert, but I have seen like Orthodox churches with statues in them,
Okay.
but they're just not venerated like
In the same way.
like an icon is. Yeah.
So you guys wouldn't call them icons?
No.
Okay, because we would call them icons.
Mm-hmm.
Like a statue of Mary is an icon.
I think we say that colloquially, but it's not particular. It's the same way we say something is iconic in terms of like
Oh.
generation.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. But I think specifically icon does
The
reference.
painting.
It references a very specific style of painting.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
It
But
just looks different in the West.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, let me see.
It just looks updated to
Yeah,
me.
and that's what I was saying about the Russian ones. Is a lot of Russian icons
Yeah.
look more modern, but they still retain a lot of the classic characteristics of like
Oh, of course.
Byzantine.
Well, there is
iconography.
still there's a rigid
Mm-hmm.
there's a guideline how you have to paint them
Right, yeah.
for them to be considered valid.
That's right. And I'm just looking at like Russian icons. Oh yeah, see like here's an example. Like this is like a newer one.
Yeah.
This is like a Russian, so it still keeps a style, but
But
you
the
can see-
yes, and the proportions are all the same.
Mm,
It almost looks creepier
yeah,
than what if it's just painted flatly.
yeah. But anyways,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't.
they're cool.
Yeah, I don't dislike them. It doesn't inspire anything in me to.
Yeah. I think when they get pretty ornate, it looks pretty awesome.
But there's something about it that doesn't like
Doesn't grab you at
call
all.
me
Yeah.
forth to anything.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I like them. I enjoy icons. But yeah.
Do you have any icons? Any Catholic icons?
No. Got a bunch of crucifixes, but I don't have any.
I got some. I don't
Yeah.
have a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not
I
one of
got
those.
Saint Herman of Alaska.
Herman.
Yeah.
That's the most native name I've ever heard. Is he a native guy?
No, he was a Russian.
Saint Herman.
So Saint
Saint Myron.
Saint Herman. Yes. No, yeah. So Saint Herman is the patron saint of Alaska and North America in Orthodoxy.
Mhm.
So he was a Russian missionary. So Alaska, of course, was part of the Russian Alaskan Company. I can't remember the exact name of it, or Russian American Company. Anyways,
Yeah.
so they were harvesting fur seals or whatever, and then they had a church, and then like things weren't going particularly great, and so they needed like more monks there,
Yeah.
and so they sent Saint Herman over, and Saint Herman was a monk on the border between Russia and Finland,
Yeah.
and he went down to Spruce Island next to Kodiak,
Yeah.
and he evangelized all the natives down there.
Oh, okay. That's very simple people.
So he
I'm not trying to trivialize his efforts.
he went
Yeah.
he did so he did the illusions and he went up the west coast. So yeah, and he did some miracles and stuff, and
Did some
So-
miracles.
so,
he's a saint.
yeah.
Are there I'm going to kind of switch the topic. Are there any like animosity or hurt feelings towards the Eastern rites who in Vatican II said we actually never were with the was it Bartholomew?
Yeah.
We actually never were with Bartholomew because that's basically when many of them got welcomed back into the church because there was like we for this entire time never actually believed in the schism. We kept practicing the way we do, and they even claim he was still our bishop, obviously, because there was line there, but they themselves said they never actually agreed with the schismatic aspect of it, even though they kept the tradition going of the Eastern rites. Do the Orthodox, or at least on your end, from what you understand or how you feel about it, is there any like almost animosity towards those groups that said that they were never with the schism?
To the Byzantine or like the Greek Catholics and stuff.
Yes, yeah.
Eastern Rite Catholics.
Yeah.
I don't really see that much animosity from the Orthodox directed towards the Eastern Catholics. Not really. Like most Orthodox internet knife fights are like either directed at Catholics or amongst themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think with them it's just kind of a just sort of one of those what would you call it? Unfortunate events of history. So like a lot of them ended up on.
I was gonna say we would say fortunate, but
Yeah. you would say fortunate. But like, so like Ruthenia, for example.
yeah. Is
Was
that Ukraine?
Western Ukraine.
So
So that was
the Ukraine.
the Ukraine.
Yeah.
So that was part, that was sort of within part of the Orthodox world or whatever, but then it got, absorbed by Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and then Austro-Hungary.
Yeah.
And then during that time, they were basically, Catholicized.
Yeah.
So it was basically like you can keep your traditions or whatever, but submit to the Pope essentially. And they're like, all right. And then,
Or you could say re-Catholicized.
Yeah.
I mean, technically speaking, they're a Catholic.
Or
Yeah.
I would say I'm a Catholic, in a certain sense, one holy Catholic and apostolic church.
Yeah. Little C.
Yeah. But
Baptists try to pull that on me, and I'm like,
little C.
Yeah.
But
will you say that on tape?
but yeah, so no, I think that's mostly it. It's just sort of one of those things that happened in the same way that like,
Yeah.
Syria used to be Orthodox, Egypt used to be Orthodox.
No, they're Catholic, aren't they?
No, they're Muslim.
Well, there's Syrian Catholics.
Right.
There's also Syrian Orthodox.
Okay.
There are, yeah.
But yeah, and the Catholicism aspects
wonder,
came in from the Crusades.
Do Easterners
from actual Eastern not Eastern Catholic, people that I've spoken to and theologians,
Yeah.
it wasn't, the majority of them wasn't that they got absorbed by somebody who converted them back to Catholicism. It was that they literally claimed that they have documentation that they never actually agreed with the schism. Like from the very beginning, they didn't, but they were still
So
They were never fellow travelers.
Part of the
basically,
thing. Part of the thing was,
especially the Byzantine Catholic, the
Yeah.
specific largest group. Yeah.
as I understand it, before the fall of Constantinople, you had sort of like an attempted rapprochement with Rome.
Yeah.
Basically, you had a situation where a lot of the bishops, not all of them, but a lot of them, basically agreed that, okay, we'll submit to Rome. We'll basically all become Eastern Catholics. But please back us up against the Turks. And then Rome's like, okay. And then they come back, and then the people and the monastics all reject it, along with some of the other bishops. They're like, what? No, like we can't do that. And then in the wake of that, some of them ended up going that way. Yeah. And then they're like, well, you see, like, it was complicated. There was like a misunderstanding and whatever. And like, but we're Catholic now, but we'll still keep doing basically everything. Orthodox will just, we'll just mention the Pope in our, service and like submit to him. And so with those congregations, I think, basically they were convinced that that was the case. And the ones who didn't, go with it were the Orthodox.
Still Orthodox? Okay.
Yeah. So,
I mean, Eastern Catholics still confuse me, but
Yeah. No,
their presence doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think that's really why they exist the way that they do, though. It's because of the schism.
Yeah.
And since they were still under the authority of the bishop, because you have to remember, these ecumenical councils that happened, the Bishop of Antioch would come, Athanasius was there for I think the bishop, the Council of Hippo when they were deciding much of the canon of the scripture and everything. And so it was just existing in that way, right? So they had their own churches, they had their own bishops, and they had their own hierarchy. And it was the same thing with the Church of England. Like when you look actually at the history of Church of England, they were called the Church of England for a long time, the way they was called the Church of Rome, because they had their own bishop, but they were still under the same umbrella. They all would basically always come together ecumenically through the councils and for agreeing on the teachings of the faith and everything. And so when the schism happened, there were many of the bishops of the smaller communities that were still under the authority of the bishop that broke away from the church. And so they technically were with them because they went with them. Do you know what I mean? Because they already existed in that area. There was no like overtaken by Rome in that area. But those smaller communities who all were basically welcomed back said that through the traditions the entire time, they never accepted the schism. They never accepted that we are breaking away from this, and so they remained in that same mode. But because they were under the purview of the bishop of the archbishop of Antioch, they obviously carried along the traditions that Antioch and everything was given to them. Like the same thing with the canonization.
Yeah, let me think about this, because I think. Because different
patriarchs, I know in the East you call them patriarchs, not bishops, but
so different patriarchs schismed with Rome at different times.
Right, yeah.
So patriarch of
the great one is with Bartholomew.
Yeah,
the great
Bartholomew in 1056.
Yeah,
54.
Or 1054. 1066 with Battle of Hastings. 1054. So in 1054, yes. And I do know that I think it was like not until like I can't remember the exact date, but it was some hundreds of years later. Only when the Church of Antioch schismed with Rome.
Yeah.
So this did not happen all at the same time.
No.
Right.
It was sort of a process that took some time to, to sort of happen. But that's just it's kind of how it goes. So, and with some of them, I could certainly imagine like some of the bishops who were like, the patriarchs, like, all right, we're no longer in communion with Rome, and some of the bishops might be like maybe, well,
right, yeah, and I think it was more like that. It was pretty much like that. They were like, well,
so you had like some sort of like rogue bishops, I would say, who who,
Bartholomew was the rogue, and the other ones were not sure.
No, man.
You're the schismatic ones.
No. Rome's the schismatic ones. I'm gonna say that.
Yeah. I was waiting.
But
just read the flashcards.
Rome's in schism. What's this papal infallibility? Yeah. You just go down the list of like all the things you guys have heard a million times. But
Essences and energies or something.
Essence, energy, distinction, absolute divine simplicity,
Palimism.
Palimism. Barlam. Yeah.
People are like Googling frantically. Like, what?
But anyways, so no, I could definitely see that. So I think it's a bit of both. So I think specifically in the parts of what is now Ukraine. I think you did have the Ukraine. Yes.
The Ukraine.
We're not saying Ukraine.
Thank you for correcting me. The Ukraine. I think you've certainly had instances where armies clash and whatever, and then they come in and then they Catholicize them. But then like you say, you also had like maybe some bishops who like when a certain church. When Rome and like Antioch excommunicated each other at some point, some of them were been like, no, we want to stay with Rome, because at that point you have to make a choice. It's like, I think it's definitely both.
Yeah, and I think it was confusing for many of them. At least from
Imagine
what,
how much time it took for
Right,
information
yeah.
to disseminate.
Yeah.
from what people, well, at least from people that I discussed with, that part would just be confusing for them because they still view the basic hierarchy as valid, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like
It's still apostolic succession.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
It's
like
not like you're totally making up a new thing.
right. It's like you don't just reject your archbishop, and so that was the problem. It was like I have this small community here in the East. He's my archbishop, and so you don't. What do you do at that point? So basically, with the way that they did, which I think is probably the most proper way to do it, which is what I think someone like Martin Luther should have done, or people that
become
followed
Orthodox.
Martin Luther. No, was
Put a
that
giant beard on every.
That
picture
was
of Martin
actually
Luther.
that was actually funny. There was actually a correspondence between Martin Luther and the Orthodox in the East,
yeah.
and basically he was like, "Yeah, you guys are like more right than the Catholics, but not right enough. So I'm gonna like start my own thing." And then the Orthodox are like, "Damn it! Like there goes our chance.
There goes Germany.
There goes Germany." So yeah, pretty prickly guy. Not very.
Didn't love the Jews.
No. The Jews and their pies. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Jews and their pies.
The swastika
Yes.
cut into the top.
But anyways, as you were saying, Jeremy.
No, like what they were essentially doing was just that they're not going to be forcefully rejecting their archbishop, but while simultaneously their practice never strayed away from Rome, and that's essentially what they did. It was like they understood that there's still the hierarchy, that he's still the bishop, that there's still the apostolic line, and so we can't fully reject him. But at the same time, the way they're going to practice it in their community was going to be not to reject what was happening over Rome, at least for what they knew was happening, because they also were ignorant.
Yeah.
They cut off. I mean, ties were cut off. Do you know what I mean? Communication was cut off. So many things that they heard was just they had to learn later on. They're like, "Oh, this is what you guys are doing now."
Yeah.
Like, they were just still practicing within their sphere, and so that's why many of them were just without like argumentation. They were just like said, "Oh, you guys never rejected. Okay, fine. Then you're still in communion with the church." Like literally, that's what happened. It was like, "Oh," and there was no. There was no huge fight or no huge ceremony. It was just a recognition that you guys were consistently within communion with the church, and I found that part very interesting because it wasn't a big bickering fight, nor even right now when you talk to the Eastern Catholics, they still don't fully reject their Orthodox bishops. In a way, which is kind of bizarre. It was like
It's bizarre to
yes,
me, but
and so what ended up happening was
A lot of them. I
yeah.
think there was a guy. I can't remember what his name was. It was Saint something.
yeah.
But
Saint something acious.
he was that connection, that tight connection between the Orthodox and the Eastern Catholics
Yeah.
still remains. And I think it was, Saint something of Wilkes Barre. I can't remember his name though. But anyways,
Wilkes Barre.
yeah, he was an American saint.
That's from Pennsylvania.
In the Orthodox
That's where I
Church.
lived near
Yeah.
Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Yeah.
And basically, he ended up converting, I think like 300. Yeah, I think it was a lot. It was something like 300,000 Eastern Catholics in the United States to Orthodoxy. Partially because, and part of the reason why it was so easy was because there was a lot of that, sort of what Jeremy was talking about, a lot of that commonality and kind of goodwill. Like, you guys are a little bit, like, we don't see eye to eye on like a couple of things, but, if you see the light, then, you guys can be back in communion or whatever, in Orthodox and good standing. So that's what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a pretty, I think, bizarre history. That,
It is a bizarre
that part, I think, it gets more muddy just because, when you believe in a hierarchy, you don't just reject a hierarchy, because it isn't the same as it was with I think the way the free for all of Protestantism. I think once that hit, that was just, it was a rejection of all things in the end. I know that many Lutherans want to claim otherwise, but in the end, what they started was. Yeah, they opened the doors for Zwinglians. They opened the doors for the Anabaptists. They opened the doors for
Mormons.
Calvinists. Yeah, Calvinists, Mormons, and all of that.
Yeah.
I actually find arguing with Mormons to be much more difficult than arguing with Protestants.
difficult.
Yes.
Well, I think
Because
it's
they're not even Christians as far as I'm concerned. Like,
Well,
I mean,
Protestants
they
are-
literally aren't because they're not even Trinitarian. They believe like
Yeah.
their conception of God is like totally.
Well, with Mormons, I've spoken.
Weird.
Like I just spoke. I spoke to one today. They say they do believe in the Trinity.
But no, that they're
Not
they're
the way
separate.
we mean
they're
it.
separate deities.
They're separate deities,
they're separate
exactly. Yeah.
deities.
So
And Holy the Mother and Mary is
Yeah.
also a deity.
Yeah, yeah. But it's that
It's like a council of deities. They're actually polytheists technically.
But
They
but what I mean by that is that it's very
So
similar.
what do they
to
call God? Is
Protestants,
it
though.
Elohim?
Yeah.
Elohim, yeah. But I think it's very similar to
Elohim
Protestants,
gave birth to Jehovah.
where
gave
they
birth to
have their own
Jesus.
conception of older ideas,
Yeah.
and that's really what it is. Is
Yeah.
that they conceive it of a different.
Yeah,
way,
Mormonism talked about.
Yeah.
That's one of the weird things about America. I was listening to a really interesting podcast. Who was it? It was Jay Burden. Have you guys heard of Jay Burden? Okay,
I
It's
know
like,
the name.
Yeah, it's like a new. Do you know Alex Kashuta,
Yeah. The blonde chick.
the blonde chick from Romania?
Is she hot?
Yeah, but she has kids. You wouldn't be.
Oh,
Remember,
I know. Yeah,
if she has kids,
it's fine.
she is pretty hot though. But I too, like you, I'm like kids.
Yeah, I know. You're taken at that point.
Taken at that point.
Yeah.
Not even interested. Not even interested.
Yeah, I know.
But anyways, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so Jay Burden, he does an interview show kind of like that.
Oh. Okay.
And one of the people he had on was like an American history guy, and I think he's a teacher at like a private school somewhere in the South, and also a convert to Orthodoxy. Interestingly enough, the history teacher, and he was talking about it. The whole show was about all the weird sects and cults and like
Protestant.
in religious things that happened specifically in the United States
Oh yeah.
that didn't happen anywhere else.
The suicide cult thing is like an American
Or just
phenomenon.
like the Shakers,
Yeah.
the Oneida community. There was like this weird,
Shakers basically killed themselves out.
because they refused to bang.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know about the Shakers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just so fucking weird. It's like, yeah,
But,
Yeah,
but
I'm like-
talk about it for the sake of.
Yeah. So
Sing the
basically, long story short, the Shakers are I believe, a Unitarian. So meaning they reject the Trinity. I don't think they believe in the Trinity. They're extremely egalitarian, and they don't have sex at all. So the only way to get more Shakers
Just to convert.
is to convert,
Almost
which
sounds
is a problem if the world becomes Shaker, because that means everyone dies out. Which is literally what happened to the Shakers. Because I remember I was watching a PBS documentary. I think it was made in the 80s
yeah.
of like the very last Shaker community, and it's like 10 old ladies.
Yeah.
Like, we're the last Shakers. And I'm like, I kind of feel bad for them in a way. I'm like, don't you guys like see how this isn't working out? You know?
They just see themselves as martyrs.
Yeah. They
It's
do.
weird.
They're
It's
dying.
bizarre. But yeah, so
Dickless martyrs.
Yeah, let's not fuck and let's see what happens.
it's not bang.
I'm gonna go pee. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's so many weird ones, and like one of the ones that I didn't know about
Yeah.
was there was an atheist woman with money, and she bought a plantation and a bunch of slaves to free them
Yeah.
and try to basically new atheist them and be like, you guys aren't Christians anymore. Like, religion's dumb. And don't you see how you're all being duped? And they're like, no.
What years
Like,
was this
atheism's
one?
dumb. This is like sometime during the antebellum period, in like the
Oh,
mid
okay.
1800s.
Yeah.
And they're like, no. But then she's like sold them on free love.
Yeah.
And then they're like, that sounds better. And then, so they're all, you know, banging and whatever. And then the community like falls apart and she's like, this didn't work out. But it's like this weird, like utopian community that she tried to develop with these slaves. So she bought them, she freed them. And then she tried to like basically have them listen to freaking, you know, like Sam Harris lectures.
Yeah.
And they weren't buying it. And then she's like, okay, that's not going to work. But
Yeah.
how about get on board with my social program, which is like marriage is like not cool and we should all be polygamous.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, that was a thing. And then there was the Oneida community. There's the Seventh-day Adventists.
Yes, they're still around,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
they're still around. Yeah,
I know 'em.
Yeah,
I know
there's
a
the
lot.
one like
There's
there's that
fucking
church in
weird.
Palmer
by the
I know,
fairgrounds?
by
yeah.
the fairgrounds. Yeah.
They're weird.
There's a family, my mom knows it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And they're bizarre because they're and all these little things happened in America.
Yes,
course,
yeah.
It's like the land.
Why do you think that is? Did he give an explanation or at least a theory of why?
Because I think America was always a dumping ground for weird religious sects that didn't have like a home in Europe. Because think about like the Puritans.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Like after Cromwell was like out and you had like the monarchy restored, they're like, get out of here.
Right,
You
yeah.
know? And the Puritans, the same thing with the Quakers. Like
Yeah.
Quakers were kind of always like, you know, Unitarians. They're like, you're a Unitarian? You're not even a Christian. Heretic. Transportation. You're going to America.
Literally, yes, but
Yeah. And and then so you just have this hodgepodge of like all these little colonies. And Rhode Island, was it Rhode Island that was a Catholic colony? Was it
they're
Rhode
still like 42% Catholic.
But it was Rhode Island.
Yeah, Rhode Island's the most Catholic state in the
Yeah, and Rhode
didn't
Island
know
was
that,
set up
yeah.
as like,
It's like half Catholics.
yeah. So Rhode Island was set up specifically as like a Catholic colony for Anglo Catholics.
That's why they were so
Or
small.
Anglo-Catholics,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's literally why it was so small.
Yeah, because there wasn't that many of
Yeah.
them.
Coming over.
And
What would Catholics want to do here?
Yeah.
also the most Jeremy will like this. The richest man in colonial America was a Catholic.
Oh, really?
He was. But he's like, that makes that's nice.
I would think a Jew.
Yeah, a small hat. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they hadn't quite shaken their shtetl ways yet by that point, I guess.
Yeah.
But what was I saying? Oh yeah, so America's always been this weird hodgepodge of all these like little religious misfits who
Yeah.
don't fit in
Yeah.
where they come from,
Yeah.
and it's majority Protestant, but
Because Protestants don't fit in anywhere.
well,
Well, they're not,
in somewhere
they're not unified.
So it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
so
yeah.
it's not somewhere like Germany,
Yeah.
where they're like you're either a Lutheran or you're a Catholic.
Yeah.
Pick one.
Yeah.
Or like Sweden, where like you're all Lutherans now. You know?
Norway, Denmark.
Yeah. So in England, they had all these different little sects
Yeah.
that popped up,
Yeah.
and then they went.
Well,
to the
there's a
New World
reason they moved here.
Exactly.
There's a reason.
because they couldn't.
Part of the
survive.
reason is the lineage.
Yeah. So they literally couldn't survive. They couldn't maintain their religion in the way they wanted in the old country.
Yeah.
So all these weirdos got shipped off to the New World.
And then the weirdos went west.
Yes. And then they started all these cults that I started talking
Yeah,
about.
the weirdo.
They started Mormonism. Mormonism got started in New York.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and
But
what
no one bought it, so he moved a bunch of people out.
Yeah.
My mom, if you listen to my mom talk about Mormons, she is 100% convinced that Joseph Smith started it because he wanted to fuck kids. Like 100%. She 100% is convinced that he wanted to diddle children.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean-
that's why he was
Yeah.
like, oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. I mean, maybe. I don't.
There's a reason that
I-
the major Mormon groups had like child brides or like a Mormon thing
Yeah.
in the U.S. You know that what's that one? The
Fundamental LDS. Yeah.
like those are the
Fundamentalist
real
LDS.
ones. Those are the real Mormons.
Yep. No. Yeah. And there's a schism in Mormon.
And I have 0 Mormon friends, so I'm not.
Yeah, I don't have any Mormon friends either. There's a lot of them in the valley. There's a lot of them in Alaska.
Yes,
There are,
very
I know.
high per capita.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I literally don't give a shit what Mormons think. So I'll say whatever I want about them. But I don't
Yeah.
care at all. But
No, but I mean the thing is like what was I saying about? Okay, so I do not discount the fact that Joseph Smith may have had a spiritual encounter, but it wasn't God.
oh, you think it's demonic?
I think it might have literally been a demonic entity that
Yeah.
taught him this stuff. So he might have literally believed his own bullshit. But the thing is like, and that in a way makes it more powerful than just a scam.
Of course. Oh, yeah.
Because a scam, I mean, scams, they don't last long.
No.
You know? But when you actually do believe something like that and get a whole bunch of people to put their souls in peril by believing your
Yeah.
your nonsense,
Yeah.
which you believe, which you are open to through like, you know, what's that Orthodox word? Prelest, like spiritual pride,
Yeah.
right? That you think you can sort of interpret the will of God, and if you get a message which is totally at odds with not just like Catholicism or Orthodoxy, but like literally everything every Christian in the world believes, except for you, you know, that's dangerous. And I think a demon could have seen that and been like, okay, let me just.
Couldn't you say
didn't he
the
have
same
an
thing about?
ether
Couldn't you say
down
the same thing about Martin Luther though?
Yeah.
I don't see how you can't say the same thing about it. I mean, Martin Luther caused much more destruction.
But he obviously believed what he was doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because I would say if anybody was much more demonically possessed, or at least was much more successful at it, it had to have been Luther. Because I mean, yeah, Mormons are the small little group of people that even Protestants hate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But Luther, I mean, fuck, he is the destroyer
Of the West.
of the entire Western Church.
Yeah.
What existed prior to him, was very different. And so I don't know. Like if there was anybody that I would say the devil had planned, was him. I think Joseph Smith is inconsequential. He might have just been a madman.
He's kind of a novelty.
See,
Yeah.
as the odd man out in this group,
Yeah.
I do have kind of with Martin Luther, like I get it, but he was still wrong.
Yeah.
You can't just like start your own thing essentially, which is what he did. And the thing is like Luther actually was even self-conscious of this to a certain extent because he tried to like be in communion with at least one bishop who had like some sort of apostolic succession. I think he found like I want to say he might actually be in communion with like the Ethiopian Orthodox or something. Just so that he could have like some tie to be like, see, I'm not totally making my own stuff. But yeah, it's a weird situation because like from my point of view, I'm like, Catholics had points, Luther had points, but they're both wrong. So Luther's critiques to a certain extent were not entirely unfounded, but his solution for what to do about it was asinine. Yeah. And it caused a lot of problems. So that's kind of
because I could see maybe he could be criticizing something that was happening locally in Germany. Mm-hmm. But a lot of his, because we read the 95 Theses on air for 4 hours. Like we've read it as much as anybody's going to read it, and like
no shit.
Yeah.
I mean, you could sum up the whole thing by saying indulgences are bad, and I don't like St. Peter's Basilica. That's really what the
whole thing is.
When people talk about like his criticism, it's like, what criticisms?
From that, I haven't read his entire.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. I don't know.
But from everything that I've read, it's always been about indulgences. Yeah, and he makes some quips about priests fucking and then going to confession. Like he you read it. Okay, we read The Jews and Their Lies, and we read his 95 Theses, right?
We read his two most important works.
The way that he writes is like is childish.
It's very like, polemical.
Yes, but it's all just
it's bad argumentation.
But it's not even good polemical. It's just it's like a angsty teenage kid writing, and so it's like randomly he throws quips at things. The Jews never stole everything or whatever. He does the same thing like when he criticized the Catholics.
They do not daily eat a morsel of food or wear a thread of clothing they have not pilfered from us by means of their accursed user. Have you never read it? Should I read the quotes? Do you want to
do it?
Okay, 1 second. Let me find it. We haven't actually. Okay, this is like our whole show is centered around on Martin Luther's and the Jews and their lies. On the Jews and their lies. You've never read it,
no,
or heard quotes.
No, I know what it is, but I
Oh.
haven't read it.
Yeah.
But this is, to me, when I read this,
Yeah.
he can't be that bad of an author.
Yeah.
Like
He's
I've
entertaining.
heard some prose, like it's pretty fun.
Yeah. That's what I mean. It's fun that way, but it's kind of vapid in terms of its argumentation.
I'm trying to find it. There was one website in Germany that was like the Luther website. What if I do .de? Is that the German one? Deutschland?
yeah.
de.de. Nope. That one's Polish. Nope. Did they retcon it?
They might have. The Jews.
Oh, wait. Here we go. Shemaphoros. No. Oh, you know what? No. I remember what website it was. It was like a Jewish website. Jewish
Yeah.
virtual library.
Look at this Martin Luther.
Yeah. So
He's
if
gonna
when you
try to
open it
sing
up,
on
it has a
lampshades.
Star of David on the Torah.
Yeah.
Jewish virtual library.
Never forget
Anti-Semitism.
Martin Luther.
It's a series on anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
It's Martin Luther or the Jews in their lives. But yeah, yeah, like it opens with "Therefore the blind Jews are truly stupid fools." So this one's one of my favorites. Is "Therefore be on your guard against the Jews, knowing that wherever they have their synagogues, nothing is to be found but a den of devils in which sheer self-glory, conceit, lies, blasphemy, and defaming of God and men are practiced most maliciously and vehemently, comma, his eyes on them. Moreover, they are nothing but thieves and robbers who daily eat no morsel and wear no thread of clothing, which they have not stolen and pilfered from us by means of their accursed usury. Thus they live from day to day together with wife and child by theft and robbery as arch thieves and robbers in the most impertinent security. And you ask a Lutheran if they've read this, and they're like, "What?" I'm like, "This is your guy.
This is your guy. You're a Lutheran." Yeah. It's just so hyperbolic. I mean, you gotta
Yeah.
laugh. You
It's
gotta
so
laugh.
good. It's
Oh,
so
yeah.
good. There's a
It's like
thing.
it's like a 16th century diss track.
Oh yeah. Oh, 100%. Because he couldn't convert them.
Most of his writings were in the end.
Yeah.
You know?
And he there's a thing about how they're liars, but they're so bad at it that even stupid people can tell they're lying. And very intense. It's a very intense work.
Yeah. No, I kind of want
But
to
it's
read it now.
kind of it's a good.
Sure, I'll
it's
chuckle
well
the whole way.
written.
It's entertaining.
It's
Yes,
entertaining.
yes, yeah.
It's good. It's not.
Like you just like imagine like laying in bed like reading
You're
it.
on the you're on the toilet reading on
Yes, yeah.
Jews in their lives.
It's just, it's just I
They're
think
like,
most
he
of
made
his
some
writings.
mistakes in his later life. No. This is your guy.
No, I know. And it's funny that most Lutherans or Protestants have never read the 95 Theses, and they always reference it as if they read it. It's like, did you actually read it?
It's
Because
just about indulgences.
yeah,
It doesn't say
I
anything
mean,
about
you would
scripture.
laugh as much as you would laugh with the Jews of the Lies in the way that it's written, because it's just polemical.
Yeah.
He's almost like a gay man who is just. Like the sassy gay guy. That's what it's like. It's like
Yeah.
reading this. Like I know he's not, because like he ran off with that
Oh yeah,
that
not a
nun.
bit of closing.
Yeah. Or maybe he fucked anything and moves. I don't know. But yeah, that was just. It was. I don't know. Like
It had nothing to do with
Had
the
to-
Bible was only in Latin.
Yes,
and
there's
it
no
doesn't have
rich
anything to do with
content
that.
in any of his writings. I think when people I guess equate with Luther is actually Calvinistic writings.
Yes,
I think Calvin
he
is,
said a lot more.
yes, he's,
Yeah,
he's the one
Calvin
that
was much more of a
right, yeah.
the big brain in the Protestant
Yes,
Reformation.
yeah, and I think they attribute it to Luther, but no, Luther was nothing. He was just he knew how to move people emotionally. I think, and I think he was very effective there because he
He
was.
was a doctor in theology though, wasn't he?
yeah, and, he obviously was not very good at it though. Yeah.
I have a PhD.
Yes, yeah.
Dr.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If Luther had a Twitter, it'd be like Martin Luther PhD
Yeah.
underneath of it, like signaling his
Dr.
credentials.
Martin Luther.
Dr. Martin Luther King. Yeah, Dr. Martin Luther. I almost said Dr. Martin Luther King, but
Junior.
it's 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Oh man. But yeah, the gotta love him, but
Do I have to?
Well,
Yes.
yeah.
The answer is yes.
Yes, the answer is yes. Right, guys?
We can't just kill all of them.
No. Nope.
Be impermissible.
Nope.
When you were like researching different faiths, did you ever consider Mohammedanism or not really? No.
White people converting to Islam.
No.
It's so funny.
No, I
It's
haven't.
like a blonde lady with blue eyes and a hijab.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah, no, I just never took Islam. Like, okay. I get that it's a serious religion with its own tradition or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not nothing. It's not as ridiculous as like Mormonism. It's not as ridiculous as Shakers.
Yeah, yeah.
But I just never, like, Islam to me just seemed,
Mimi.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
it's,
you're a white guy.
well, it's not just Mimi. It's just, it just didn't make, like, to me personally, okay. So Islamic arguments basically are, in a large sense, Jewish arguments in terms of their theology. So like,
No.
Unitarian, non-Trinitarian, reject, Jesus as, the Son of God, but they accept him as the Messiah. And there was just, I just didn't really find it that convincing because I was always a Christian and always found Christianity convincing, even if
You didn't know what it was exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and as I've sort of gotten more into sort of my faith and coming to understand Orthodoxy more, Mohammedanism
Yes.
just sort of looked more and more less interesting. So I actually respect it now more than I did when I was in.
There's some of the
sort
best
my youth.
food.
Yeah, they do have good food. And I can say that with some authority because
Yeah.
there's actually a lot of Muslims in Cape Town. A lot of them.
We said Pakistanis and stuff.
It's not just the Pakistanis. So a lot of the Indonesians who came over, Indonesians, of course, are
Like 70% Muslim? 60?
yeah. So like a majority of them are Muslim,
Yeah.
and the ones who came to Cape Town did. And the Indonesians intermarried with the Khoisan and the Coloreds. So a lot of the Coloreds in Cape Town. Don't laugh, Jeremy.
You have to explain what that is.
So
They're the mixed ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what the
Yeah,
colors are. Yeah, but it just
So-
sounds funny coming from a white guy.
now let me tell you about the colored people
Yeah, yeah.
down in
colored,
South
man.
Africa.
South African colored people.
The South African colored people.
He's the colored boy.
He's a colored gentleman. I seem to recall
You brought home a colored man.
you brought home a colored female to this house.
That's interesting that
Do
you've
you
always
have no
So-
pride?
you always found Christianity. What about Christianity was convincing to you? Actually, I actually find that pretty curious
Well, for
because
me,
I find that hard to argue for.
oh, well, for me, it just sort of makes sense. For me, it always made sense. Like, because what was I saying? Oh, so before
Okay,
I forget
yeah,
with the food thing. So, anyways, a lot of the coloreds, specifically in Cape Town, are Muslim.
Oh, okay.
Not a majority of them, but a significant minority of them, to the extent that you have like certain parts of Cape Town which are Muslim coloreds, basically,
Okay.
and they make really good food.
Yeah, yeah.
And my wife's best friend is a Muslim colored, and he just likes it when I say colored.
The color that color boy down the street told me his name is now Ali.
The color boy down the street now told me his name is Ali.
Why how's his name Ali now?
Yeah. So what was I saying? So anyways, yeah. The cuisine tore through the colored community. They all eat the same food. They all like biryani. They all like acne. They all eat curry. Like everybody. So yeah, I've eaten a lot of that. Now, so with Christianity, why did I find it convincing? So for me, I've always believed in God, and I consciously kind of became a Christian after my uncle died when I was about, when was this?
Was it an expected death or like?
It was unexpected. He was killed in a motorcycle accident near Chugiak High School
Oh.
in 2001. So, and then
you were
after
like,
that,
you were like 9 or 10.
I was about, I was young. I was like 9 or 10. And then after that, you just start thinking about things because, as a kid confronted with like a death of like a close family member. And I was like really tight with my uncle. I really loved him. And, then you just start thinking about, because I had sort of believed in God, but then I'm like, okay, what is God?
No.
What's going to happen to me when I die? What is the correct thing to think about here? And Christianity to me, because I'd always believed in God, and I just, for me, it was just kind of largely experiential and intuitive, in the sense that I'm like, okay, God exists, but what is He? And I just found Jesus and His ministry on earth such a compelling thing that it was just natural for me. And yeah, that was basically it. And then from there, when I got interested in Orthodoxy, it was just basically because when I was about 20, I'm 30 now. So I think when I was like 23-ish, so about 7 years ago, I was like kind of flirting with deism, but not really.
Theism?
Deism. So like God created the world, but He like leaves it alone. So he wound up the clock and then He stepped back.
Yeah.
Basically. Because I was having like some sort of difficulties with just sort of my faith and like my personal life. I was never like an atheist or whatever.
Yeah.
And I didn't like reject it entirely. I'm like, yeah, I'm still based kind of a Christian in my own mind. But I was going through some stuff, and that was sort of the time where I started looking into the history of Christianity a bit more. And I had a college friend who was Orthodox, who I always respected a lot. And he is a great guy. He moved away some time ago, but and when I was sort of decided to sort of get my life spiritually kind of back on track, I was looking at different traditions. I was looking at Catholicism. I was looking at, Lutheranism. Sorry, Jeremy.
It's fine.
But
Get out!
get out. Yeah. But I realized that what I was doing wasn't correct, and I needed to look back further. So I was looking at these different traditions, and then I remember my friend and Orthodoxy, and then I had also known about Orthodoxy, and I was like, all right, let me investigate this. And then at that point, just sort of the more I looked into it, the more I read about it, and juxtaposing it with Catholicism and Lutheranism, it just seemed natural to me. And then at that point, I was like, okay.
But you never dabbled in Catholicism, correct?
No, I did sort
Not
of
really.
Not super hard, no. But I did I was considering it because ever since I was, I don't know, I guess sort of a teenager, some of the specific claims about Catholicism just never made sense to me.
Yeah.
Basically. So, and then
Is it mostly just a reference to the Pope, to the papacy?
to a large extent,
Yeah.
not entirely, like most of the, as you know, a lot of the theology between Orthodoxy and Catholicism is similar
Yeah.
to a very large extent. More so than like if you were to compare Orthodoxy with like, I don't know, like Lutheranism.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
a lot more. There's a lot more in common. But mostly the papacy was a big deal. And if I looked at the early church, I just couldn't really see evidence for it. up
So-
until about, the time of the schism. And then I'm like, okay, like
So
I think this is
So you don't have a central figure, a person. Do you have a person like a pope figure? Not the pope, but a Orthodox
so
Popov.
so I am
Popa.
Who's the Orthodox Pope? Tell me.
so we have we
Got
have
the bishop.
we
Pope.
have what they are called patriarchs.
Yes, but there's not a patriarch. That's the big one.
There is a head one though, isn't it?
Not really.
No,
So
yeah.
there.
Oh,
So
okay.
the ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew is basically kind of like a first among equals thing.
Is a what thing?
It's sort of like a place of honor, basically.
But he doesn't have authority.
No, he doesn't have like,
specific
no.
delegating authority.
Yeah. So like the patriarch
okay.
of Moscow, Patriarch Kirill, Patriarch John of the Antiochian Church, Patriarch Theodore.
Is
of
Antioch
Ars-
in Turkey? Where is Antioch?
So Antioch's interesting
Istanbul.
because it is now currently the city of Ankara
in Turkey.
in Turkey,
Uh-huh.
but they were driven out.
Because Antioch was coastal, wasn't it? It was closer to Lebanon.
Was it how much actually? I would have to look at that.
Or I might be
don't know.
thinking of something.
Yeah. So
There's a bunch of places in there.
so
I could be easily.
so what
getting mixed
ended up
but-
happening though is that the Patriarch of Antioch, the Church of Antioch,
Mm-hmm.
ended up relocating to Damascus,
in Syria?
which is where it is today. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Man,
because
can you
they were
imagine doing that,
displaced by the Mohammedans.
and they went to Damascus.
Which is still a fairly multi faith place, as I understand.
Oh,
it today.
okay. Okay.
So Syria does have quite a bit of
Because there's a lot of
religious
Syrian
movements.
Catholics. What are they called? Syriac Catholics? Syriac.
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another one.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few. There's a few Catholic branches
Yeah.
whose names do not actually reflect where they are.
Yeah.
Like one, Syriac might be the one in India.
Syriac Church of the East.
Might be in India.
right.
It
Yeah, I
might
see
be
what
in
you
the
mean,
one
yeah.
in India has a name that has
Yeah.
nothing to do with India, but it sounds
Yeah.
like Syria.
Yeah, there's the Indian
something.
Orthodox as well. They're called the Malankara.
That sounds Indian to
Christians.
me. But the name for the
Yeah.
Indian Catholics has nothing, at least
Right,
to me,
yeah.
to do with India.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I guess I just find it interesting
Because I thought
that-
there was a central patriarch guy. I thought there was like a guy.
No, we don't have like an.
Because now
equivalent of-
now
we
the
don't
problem
have-
with the Pope makes more sense to me. Because I always thought there was like a main guy, and I was
No.
like, well, if you
Right,
have
yeah.
your main guy, what's your problem?
No,
with
we don't have a main.
that main guy
Yeah.
as a figure.
Yeah.
But now that I didn't know, know that there was a guy.
Yeah.
So how does the church stay organized?
Well, it
Is
sort
it-
of operates synodally.
Depending on where you are, like Lutherans do that. Like there's the Missouri Synod. There's the
Yeah, except the thing is,
but they're all friends with each
so
other.
it's much more hierarchical than like Lutheranism.
yeah. But
So-
to what point? I guess would be my question. Where do the jurisdictions
Yeah.
become?
Yeah. So it depends on sort of what church you're in. So if you are, let's say you're in the Antiochian church.
Okay.
So the Antiochian church, you have your priest and your deacon, and then you have your bishop above that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have, let's say you're in America, then you have the metropolitan who's in New York. That's where his seat is. And then
In
above,
all of the U.S.
Mhm.
Okay.
and then above him, you have the patriarch John,
Uh,
who's the head, who's the patriarch, the father,
Of-
whatever, of the Antiochian Orthodox Church, which is in full communion with all the other churches.
but they're not. One doesn't preside over all the others.
No.
Okay.
So the reason and the way that they
How does that stable? Is it stable? Do
Yeah.
branches break off?
not really.
Okay.
The only thing where that sort of happened recently that I can think of is in the Ukraine war, where basically you had like CIA operatives.
Shocking.
Basically inflame Ukrainian nationalists and be like, fuck Russia. And then they, try to split from the Patriarchate of Moscow, which they've always been a part of forever.
Yeah.
So, So that happened.
But if that were to happen, it's not like they wouldn't be in communion with all the others. They're just a new hierarchy.
Well,
Or
so
does everybody have to agree? That
yeah,
they're
so
in or
this
not?
is where it gets a little dicey. So the Patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople
Mhm.
acknowledged them, but
Is that Istanbul? Is what you mean? Is
yeah,
okay,
Istanbul.
okay. No, I'm just.
Yep. But Patriarch Kirill obviously had.
But
like,
he
an
does
issue
have a
with it.
special title, doesn't he?
He does. He's the ecumenical patriarch.
Yeah.
But what's the point?
So it's sort of like a. So it's the same way that we would say, it's the same. It's of a similar status as we would say Rome used to have before they got power hungry.
Okay.
Where basically it's a seat of honor where he's like a first among equals thing. So he's like the more, it's like a more revered seat.
Okay.
But there is a certain degree of equality among the patriarchs and bishops.
But he does have the authority, like, to excommunicate and stuff.
Yeah. So he can
I don't
excommunicate.
understand what.
So
the
he can
difference is.
excommunicate stuff, but he can't excommunicate someone on behalf of all orthodoxy. Does that make sense?
But isn't it once you
What would
fall
be
out
the-
of
what
favor
would-
of his authority, you're not really belonging to the ecumenical community anymore?
No. So because the thing is like the other churches
Can
also have
accept you.
yeah. So he can, so that it's kind of like what we were talking
Yeah.
about before with the Great Schism.
Right.
So
yeah.
like the Patriarch of Constantinople, he can technically excommunicate like the Church of Rome, for example. But it wasn't until sometime later that the other churches, like the church in Antioch, excommunicated the Bishop of Rome as well. So he can't just make a decision unilaterally for
But
all
they
the
could have just
churches.
not done that.
Yeah.
They could have just not.
Yeah.
Not.
Yes.
So I don't understand. I don't understand the relationship between. How can you be excommunicated from one, but then not all of them?
Well, that's the thing. There is no one single head of orthodoxy. The head of orthodoxy in the Orthodox theology is Christ.
Okay.
So Christ is the head of the church,
Yeah.
and he has the bishops appointed by apostolic succession, and the patriarchates developed as a way of sort of administration, and they
Yeah,
also
yeah,
have
yeah.
apostolic succession.
But what does it mean to be excommunicated from an Orthodox?
It means you can't. It means you
patriarchate
can't take communion at
There.
that church.
there, but then you could over somewhere else.
Well, but the thing is then if you come into another church, they'd be like, why are you not taking, like, why are you here? Why are you not taking communion at this church? And then when you find out the reason why, then you're like, oh, wait. So you're like,
But then
blaspheming
they,
the
but
Holy Spirit.
but they
So now I
couldn't
can't
go.
give you-
Well, actually, you're not. They have to recognize the excommunication of somewhere else.
yeah. So basically,
Like if I'm excommunicated in Armenia, and then I go to Turkey,
right.
they have to recognize the excommunication in Armenia.
So like I say, it sort of depends on the circumstance of the excommunication. So, for example, like someone in Russia,
Yeah.
and I don't even think it's necessarily that they're like excommunicated. They just say they're in schism. And
So they can only declare schism.
well, okay, no, they can't excommunicate somebody. But it's the way it works is it's less.
Binding.
So first off, people just like in Catholicism,
Yeah.
not excommunication doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a pretty rare thing when it happens. But basically, if you get excommunicated by a certain church and you try to hop jurisdictions to another church under another bishop, probably in another place.
Yeah. Not in the same town.
Yeah. Then, you could be like, hey, I want to take communion here. And then it'll be like, all right, so like, were you excommunicated? And then usually they phone, they're like, hey, I got this parishioner. Like, he's here. Seems a little weird. Oh, yeah, we excommunicated him. Okay, for what reason? Oh, like he denies the Trinity or something. Oh, okay. Well, that's a good reason. And then Sorry.
But
can't give you
could there
communion.
be circumstances in which you're excommunicated somewhere, but then not somewhere else?
I imagine so, hypothetically.
Because then I wouldn't understand what excommunication is.
Well, because then at that point, it's sort of like up to the Holy Spirit, I guess.
But just practically speaking, and I mean, correct
Am
me
I
if
not asking you? Do you know what I'm?
Yeah,
confused
because
about? Am I
correct
not
me if
asking
I'm
the right
wrong,
questions?
but from what I understand is that if the if the patriarch from Constantinople excommunicates somebody, and then there's another patriarch from a smaller community that doesn't recognize his authority, basically, that doesn't recognize his excommunication, then that community is not really in favor within the larger ecumenical community of the larger Orthodox faith, right? And so, I think this is what I mean. It seems,
the thing is okay. Yeah, my memory's sort of kicking in on this.
Yeah.
Sorry, the wine.
And the like 4 shots worth of bourbon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so the way this works, what's the word? Ecclesiastically, is things are handled at the local level. So you have an issue, and then you can, let's say you get excommunicated by your priest. This is unjust. Then you can appeal to the bishop, and then you can appeal up to the
Like, what's the top of the ladder
the top of the ladder is basically the patriarch,
in Moscow?
no, or whoever yours is.
Oh, okay.
So basically, and then the other churches recognize that, okay, this individual was excommunicated, and it is handled within this church. Now, typically in the past, if you had, and that was typically for lay people, but if there was like an ecclesiastical issue,
Yeah.
what could either happen was either Constantinople would be the last court of appeal, you could think of it as.
But why? If that patriarch isn't preside over the others, why would that be the case? It's just an arbitrary.
And it was also the same
Place.
thing in Rome. So like in the Western half,
Yeah.
the Pope was the sort of last part of
Yes,
appeal.
yeah.
And the Catholic Church
It
still
still is
operates
that way, yeah.
the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the East, the Patriarch of Constantinople operated in a similar way. And then you would have, and that's sort of how it worked. And it's still the same today, basically.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That ultimately is that they're just rejecting that beyond the Bishop of Constantinople is the Bishop of Rome. That's really what they're
But
rejecting.
there's
Not-
no
not-
special title or official authority.
He. This is what I mean. He does because
He has a special place of honor, but he doesn't have like,
But
in
be-
terms of like
But
actual,
if he's the last adjudicator, he would have special
He
authority.
would, right? Yeah.
but only in specific circumstances.
But still, I mean, the Pope does too.
Right. But the difference is that it's not, he's not the monarch of the church in the same way that the Pope is.
I don't see how. I don't
He is.
know. I'm
Because-
really not trying to be inflammatory at all. I'm not understanding what the fundamental difference is.
yeah, I don't think Grant is saying that the
I'm not.
Pope is not the monarch of the church, but he's saying that he doesn't see the actual substantive difference between that and the patriarch. Yeah, that he's saying that
There's a
see-
lot of differences.
the patriarch
but I'm
essentially
not-
would be the monarch of the Orthodox.
Not-
if he's the last adjudicator.
If he
makes the final
Be-
decision.
yeah, because the way
if
that
presented with it, because the Pope doesn't make every decision.
he doesn't, right? Because
Yeah,
No,
it's kind of
I mean, he
local
can't.
rules,
There's
but-
how
Yes,
many
exactly, yes.
gazillions Catholics?
right, like
Bill- 2 billion?
And
you're
it's
supposed
the
to.
same thing, and it's the same thing in the
Yeah.
Orthodox Church as well. Like, I mean, he can't.
But it isn't the same thing.
No, but I mean,
somehow.
no, but I mean, in the sense that
Yeah.
he can't like adjudicate everything. So it was decided a long time ago, like pre-schism.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about, like the ecumenical councils that Catholics and Orthodox,
Yeah.
supposedly agree on.
Yeah.
That this is sort of the way it works, and then you sort of respect the things in that. And then if you have an issue where you want to appeal it, and it typically would be an ecclesiastical issue.
Yeah. Or a doctrinal issue.
Yeah, then that would be, but specifically like so it wasn't a doctrinal issue. If it was like an ecclesiastical issue, then that would be the last court of appeal in the East would be the Patriarch of Constantinople. The last court of appeal in the West would be the Bishop of Rome. But doctrinal issues were handled synodally.
But they had to agree.
In the
Synod
event-
of everybody.
Yes.
Like everybody had to
Everybody had to agree.
Okay.
Yeah. So
But
that's
what-
how doctrine is
yeah.
set.
But I guess that isn't different from the Catholic Church. That's why they have councils.
Yes.
Yeah, because there really is no difference.
The Pope doesn't
there.
have veto power. In
He
the
doesn't,
councils,
right?
yeah.
Yes.
So like
But that's the
patriarch-
thing.
What was that?
Or the Patriarch doesn't have veto power in the same way that the Pope does.
The Pope doesn't have a council.
Right. Yeah.
He just a vote.
Yes, but he
Yeah.
could potentially speak ex cathedra on something.
Yes,
you wanted
yes,
to.
but not
Yes.
at a count. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Kind of.
And also, the Pope, the Patriarch of Constantinople, doesn't appoint every bishop in the world like the Pope does.
So like he can't. So that patriarch couldn't.
He doesn't
He
get to
couldn't-
decide who the bishop of
He can't say
Romania.
actually you can't appoint him.
yeah.
Oh,
Can't
okay. Oh, that's a difference.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
a major difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's no so that's
Because to me that sounds like
a
a
very
less.
big
That sounds like a
difference.
less powerful pope,
Right. Yeah.
it's a
yeah.
much less powerful Pope, yeah.
but it's still popish.
Well,
I know that wouldn't. You would say no. But he still has adjudicating power.
right.
in
So
it.
and that's the thing.
I'm
It's,
not
it's
going to
more
make
of-
you say he's a pope because it's just a title. It's not.
Yeah.
It's
I
not
know,
made
right,
by
right.
the
and actually we do
Yeah.
have I think one of his titles is Pope. There's actually no, but I mean like specific. I might be wrong, but but
Okay. You just
I
throw
might-
that
I might-
right in under the
I might be wrong.
under the radar.
but it means because there's also one there's also one
Yeah.
in Egypt as well,
Yeah, it can be called pope.
who's also called a pope, but it's just sort of a title. It means like
Well,
father.
it is. Yeah, it is a title.
Yeah.
Oh, but that's just the word they use.
Yeah,
for-
yeah. That's it's.
Well, that's
but
the
it doesn't.
word we use.
Yes.
Right.
But it doesn't mean the same thing.
Yeah.
So we don't want to. So the word and the concept are very different. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, very different.
They are different.
Oh, I know they're different in some
Yeah.
ways. It doesn't
But
to me-
are they fundamentally different? I
Yes.
think that's what it is. Because the only things you really listed
Yeah, no,
were
there's-
were cosmetic differences. Basically, you're saying
No,
that
no.
there's-
I'm
no,
not.
hold on.
Not cosmetic differences.
Let me explain really quick. So it's kind of
I need
like
more wine.
just
the Orthodox
sake of
drink
the
as much
argument.
as the Catholics. It's good. It's all good.
It's
Yeah.
fine. It's
It's
fine.
fine. Lutherans drink a lot too, though. So.
It's because they're so grumpy.
They're
so
Germans.
Right, that's good. That's good.
what I'm saying is that it's kind of going back like to a Platonic argument, right? And so this is what he always tries to drill people for the fundamental distinction, because when you say, okay, you have these two leaders, right? Two leaders of group of people. Leaders as being the final say of what passes or what gets denied ultimately.
No.
Because hold on. Because for example, if there is a problem theologically that a certain community is going, and they go through every level of appeal, it ultimately ends with the Bishop of Constantinople.
But it doesn't.
How not?
So
Yeah, okay.
specifically, all the appeal process existed for clerical issues.
Like who goes where?
Not who goes where, but basically like if a bishop is like fighting with another bishop and it's like, no, this is my seat or whatever.
Yeah.
So basically we're not talking about matters of doctrine. We're talking about like other things, like church business.
So if there's an Orthodox church in the Ukraine that says that Mary is actually God,
Right.
they're allowed to do that and still remain Orthodox.
No.
Why not?
So what would happen is is that the bishop would say this is heresy.
Which bishop?
So the bishop over that specific congregation.
No. Let me say. Let's say it was the bishop of
Okay.
Ukraine, and this is what he deems for his entire community.
The Ukraine.
So
The
what
Ukrainians,
happened is
yeah.
then what would happen is then a synod of the local bishops.
Local or all of them?
Not all bishops in the world.
Okay.
Because let's say this is a matter in Ukraine.
Oh, okay.
The synod of the bishops would say this is heresy. And then
Who presides over the synod?
All of them together.
it sort of depends on sort of what issues the synod is looking at.
So it could be different.
So it could be different.
So let's say it's doctrinal, just for the sake of
So
argument,
like what we're saying. So let's say there's a bishop in in Ukraine who says that
Ukraine.
the Ukraine
yeah.
who says
Hunger
that
strike in the Ukraine title? What?
hunger strike in the Ukraine. Oh God.
Anyway.
That just totally derailed me. Okay, so let's say there was a bishop who had some congregations in the Ukraine who said Mary is God. What would I assume? What would happen is that, from my understanding, is that there would be a synod of bishops, which may be presided over by the patriarch, which would then address the issue internally and declare it as heresy to be in accordance with the faith and the creed, which is held by Orthodoxy universally.
So
But it has to be.
So let's say the first synod that they come together does not have the patriarch in it, and then they all agree with Ukraine. What happens after that?
If they decide on the
Yeah,
heresy is correct.
Yeah, what if they say, "Oh, I guess the Ukraine is correct"? What would happen after that point?
So you're talking about like the patriarch.
No, because you said it may or may not include the patriarch. So let's say the first synod that they have does not include the patriarch.
Okay.
And so these groups of bishops who have the
So,
synod,
okay, so-
then all agree with the Ukraine and be like, okay,
Okay.
you're correct. Mary is God. What happens after that then?
Well, then it basically expands. So let's take the first example. Let's say it's a whole chunk of Ukraine that says Mary's God. So it's like a big deal.
okay.
You have a big thing. It's not just like one church or something.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. The patriarch gets involved. Then you have, your synod.
The patriarch of the Ukraine gets involved. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he would come in and they would hash it out. They would say, this is in accordance with what we've believed and what we've always believed. And then they would make a statement on it. And then all the other churches would get a copy and they'd be like, yep, agreed, checks out. And then
What if they didn't?
well, that's what I'm saying is
Yeah.
this is how it actually works in reality.
Okay.
And then they would be declared heretics and then excommunicated and asked to stop their heresy.
Yeah. But if they
In the
Right,
same way,
but-
in the same way
Yeah.
that would happen in Catholicism.
Right, but I guess what I mean is that the reason why I'm pushing it towards further than that is because ultimately, if the first synod still recognizes what you're saying heresy as valid, wouldn't it go further then? Because ultimately, there will have to be a synod or a council with the Patriarch of Constantinople to really adjudicate whether what they're doing is heretical or not. Because
Because the patriarch does not determine doctrine. The only way doctrine is determined in the Orthodox Church is through tradition and the a council of the Orthodox. So like the ecumenical councils that
Yeah.
which happen.
Right,
But there's no distinct body beyond the universal Orthodox Church that decides.
Correct.
So theoretically, if they don't have then any hierarchy in that sense, they don't have a final hierarchy.
Can they schism from each
We
other?
don't have one guy at the top. Yeah, we do have a hierarchy.
Do you have like 10 guys at the top? Is it like a council of 10 guys? Or
No,
Should we look him up? What's his name?
patriarch who? Which one? Where?
The main patriarch.
in
Are you
Moscow?
talking about in?
Moscow, the final adjudicator guy.
Are you talking about in Constantinople?
Yeah.
Whoever the final adjudicator.
So the ecumenical patriarch is Patriarch Bartholomew
in
in Constantinople. Yeah.
and that's Istanbul for my because if you say like the patriarch of Constantinople, I'm gonna think we're talking 1,000 years ago. But,
Yeah.
But, I know what you
No,
mean.
but that's still his
I
title. Yeah.
appreciate your tradness in that. And refusing to use.
Well, that's what that's
Yeah,
that's his
That's
official
literally-
title.
I know, but it
he's
also-
not called the Patriarch of Istanbul.
That's what I mean. Refuse.
So here's a question I found. It says, what is the process of deposing an Orthodox patriarch as head of their particular Orthodox church? So that's kind of like what we're talking about right now as an example, right?
Yeah.
That let's say there's a heretical patriarch. It says, what is the process of it? It says, after posting the question, does the Russian Orthodox, blah, blah, blah. That just starts talking about what's happening currently. That's
There'd be a council, and then they
yeah.
decide to kick him out or not.
or not. Okay.
But
But they're
the
all bound to preside by the decision of the council.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But whenever you say they, I guess I don't know who you're speaking of then.
Whoever partakes in the council, just as in the past. So you would have like some priests, you'd have a lot of bishops, you'd have patriarchs there.
Oh,
and they
so
would
it is just
all-
kind of everybody of different levels.
Yeah, but they would. Yeah.
It's
and
not
I'm
like
not
you have
exactly.
to be a patriarch.
Yeah,
of
and I'm
like-
not exactly
okay.
sure like who all gets to vote because different churches have different things. So, for example, like we're having, like there was an election recently, or there was a metropolitan who was retired, and the process to find a new one is that all the clerk, and this is specifically in America,
Yeah.
and different churches do this differently. But the process to have a new metropolitan put in place was the clergy all came up with a list, and then the top 3 would be picked by the synod.
And they vote or
Yeah.
okay.
So the top 3 picks of all the names that were put forward would be chosen by the synod.
So it's less of
From
a
the top 3.
It's less of
But that's just one way they do it.
Yeah.
Other people, it's more like the way sort of. So you may have like more sort of like direct appointings,
yeah.
but jam with Chris. That's for tomorrow.
Nice.
But so yeah, it depends, and that's the thing is like there is no like universal way things are done. So different churches have different ways of doing things, and even the what was it? I think it was, I can't remember which ecumenical council was it, but it was an early one where they said that the what was the exact wording? The honors and privileges that the ancient honors and privileges that Alexandria has shall be preserved as they are in Rome, meaning that the Patriarch of Alexandria would have certain leeway to sort of decide how they want to do things, like Rome did. So they were recognized as having a certain degree of authority within this area, and that they could, like Rome does, make choices on sort of how they want to run things ecclesiastically, not on doctrine. They can't just make up their own stuff, but in terms of how they want to, the mechanics of how they want to run the church, how they want to appoint priests, how they want to like elect bishops and whatever, or appoint bishops. That was up to them.
Because I'm trying to think of how I'm trying to like come up with like a spatial way to organize it in my head instead of like a pyramid. It's more like a.
Yeah, there's actually it's funny you mentioned that actually.
So I'm trying to.
Yeah, I know, I'm
I
trying to
actually
figure it
saw-
out
I'm
right now.
trying to
actually saw-
visualize it because I'm not. I'm not
actually saw something-
hearing the fundamental difference.
Okay, there was
But maybe if I could see it.
Yeah, I know. That's right. I'm really trying to figure it out right now. Yeah, because
here, let me. There's actually. I'm actually gonna see if I can find it because I saw this a while ago. I think it was like
you saw a
week ago.
visual.
Yeah, it was actually a visual, which is
Because maybe that would make it make.
Yeah.
Because if they're all equal, there can't be a final adjudicator. If there's a final adjudicator, he's the guy.
But again, it
depends on the area. There's many final adjudicators depending on the
it's
issue.
sort of and
Okay.
again, it's mostly, and it would only come into adjudication when you had like bishops going after other bishops.
That's what but it's still an adjudicator.
Right, because I mean everything. I'm just reading some things briefly. I mean, it's still apparently there's 5 main patriarchs. I didn't know that.
Okay.
So it seems like there's 5. According to the
To
internet,
what you're finding on Google.
yes, according to the internet, there's 5 main patriarchs. But he is.
Keeping looking. I know where I need to look.
For your
He
visual.
is
Yeah.
Bartholomew is basically the head of the 5 bishops. It's like 5 patriarchs.
Technical term is first among equals, as I say.
Right. But I mean, what does that mean? That means this is so. Let's use I think an example. I think might work a little better. Maybe it might be more confusing, but let's say there's 2 households, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have 2 households, and both of them you have a father in both in each one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in these 2 households, one father,
Here we go.
for example, the way he runs his household is that they have family meetings. You know, he allows his wife to kind of make decisions on how to do certain things. They have to communicate with each other and so on and so forth. And then you have another household where the father does not have any meetings. He does not give any kind of authority within the mother, and he just says, "This is the way you're going to do it." In both cases, both of them are fathers, but there's no fundamental distinction. There's only particular differences.
My question would be, why is the blue one highlighted?
Just to show which one.
Which one is the head?
It's not the head though.
No,
like,
but
it's
I
not.
mean, but
Okay, which one is the
but he's a
special
different
one?
color.
Yeah.
It's just sort of showing different autocephalous churches.
Okay. Yeah.
And it says Constantinople, first among equals.
But he's highlighted.
Yeah, because it was the seat of the empire.
We can just.
No, I find
agree.
this interesting.
I
Yeah.
know. I don't understand why.
But he's highlighted. We're just saying
Yes.
he's highlighted because he's.
Yeah.
Because
Like I said,
Yeah.
Constantinople had, as the center
Yeah.
of the Eastern Empire, had privileges
Yeah.
akin to those in Rome.
And that's why Rome is where it is.
yes.
Yeah.
Because it was the center.
Yeah, because it was a center of the empire in the West.
So they just it's like an anchor,
Yeah.
but there's no significance beyond that.
Yes. And because of its central location within the empire, because of it being the administrative capital, it would make sense also as, the greatest city in that part of the world.
Yeah.
It would make sense that you would have that be a specific see, which has authorities like you have in Rome.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So
No,
it's the same. It's this,
no,
But he's not a pope.
I get,
Yeah.
but I get.
and I
Right.
would argue the Pope wasn't the Pope until
Well, he is
what he became in the Middle Ages, as you understand it. So, and that I guess this is where the fundamental disagreement is.
Yeah.
Is we don't have a problem with hierarchy. We don't have a problem with authority and whatever. We don't have a problem with bishops, all that sort of stuff. But the problem is the specific claims that the papacy makes for itself vis-a-vis other churches is one of the major issues.
Right, and I think maybe cosmetic was the wrong term that I
And
used.
it's not just cosmetic.
Right, that's what I mean.
Yeah, yeah,
Cosmetic
it's-
was probably the wrong term that I used, but it is more of a particular distinction rather than a fundamental one. And that's what I mean by that, is that to have a fundamental distinction is like what evangelicals have. That's a fundamental distinction because there is actually no anything. I mean, when you say it is what was it, first amongst many or primary amongst many? What was
First among equals.
Yeah, first among equals. I mean, what you're saying is that he is the first among these patriarchs, right? And so when you use that terminology, it's not that it is fundamentally different.
It's a place of honor.
Right. It's not fundamentally different than saying that the bishop of Rome, which we call the Pope, is basically the authority, the final authority of what I guess any kind of ecumenical issues that they really have in the end of the day, because
But it's not
that's what I mean.
specifically ecumenical issues. The Patriarch of Constantinople mostly existed for ecclesiastical issues.
Okay, fine, but now you're getting
But he's
into
not issues of doctrine.
what I'm saying is that now you get into the specifics, the particular differences. So these two churches have a hierarchy, and they have an end to that hierarchy. Ultimately,
The difference is that here's a big difference.
Okay.
If the patriarch, if the Church of Constantinople
Yeah.
disappeared, there would still be an Orthodox Church.
Yeah, we would say the same.
If the Roman Catholic Church and the papacy was gone,
Yeah.
there would be no Roman Catholic Church.
If there was no Roman church,
Yes.
then there would be no Roman church.
If there was no supreme pontiff, if he didn't exist,
But the other
there would
bishops
be-
would still exist.
yeah, the other bishops would still exist. But I'm saying Roman Catholicism is predicated on the existence of the papacy to a large extent. And if you took away that key thing, like the faith would no longer exist. It'd be something else. Fundamentally,
moved
it would be
legitimately.
something else.
Yeah.
It would be something
It-
else fundamentally, in a way that is not true of Orthodoxy.
But again, what
So if the Bishop
hold
of
on.
Constantinople went away,
Yeah.
Orthodoxy would still exist.
Yeah.
but again, what the
It
difference?
doesn't rely.
But that's still a
on-
particular difference. That's not a fundamental difference.
It is a fundamental
No,
difference.
you could say that has a fundamental consequence, but that's not a fundamental difference. A fundamental difference is to have no authority. A fundamental difference is to have no head. A fundamental difference is to have no ecumenical councils. A fundamental difference will be something that is fundamental to the faith. What we have here, we have two leaders, but they have particular difference in power. You could say that the Pope has greater power in the Western Church than the Patriarch of Constantinople has in the Eastern Church, but that's just a distinction in power and degrees of power, not so much that there's a difference that there is no power at all. When you look at the evangelical world, that's a fundamental difference, because there is no first amongst equals. There is no Pope. There is nothing. There is no hierarchy that leads to that. And so when you're asking, when I think when Grant was asking, but what is the fundamental difference? What he's looking for is like, if what
saying
then
there-
the Orthodox has an issue with is not so much that there's a hierarchy and that there's an authority. What they have an issue is within the way the authority functions. Is that you're saying that you're giving too much power to the Pope, that the West gives way too much authority to the Pope, and they allow the Pope to run things far too much, where it should be more
What's the word you used? Autocephalous.
Yeah.
yeah, and so that's not a fundamental difference. That's just a particular one. You have two systems as hierarchy and authorities, but you're saying that in this case there's too much in this area. It's unbalanced. It shouldn't be. It's
too top heavy.
It's too top heavy, right? And so that's more of a difference in I guess degree rather than difference in kind, because ultimately if every appeal ecumenically ends up with a Patriarch of Constantinople, that
But
essentially
they don't though.
they don't have to, right?
Yeah.
But in the Western Church, it's the same thing. Look at
And
the bishops.
I'm not even
yeah.
sure if that's how that even works anymore. I just
Yeah.
know that in the past, and this is like literally like 1,500 years ago.
Yeah.
That it was practiced that if there was an issue where you had disputes among bishops,
Yeah.
specifically, that the Patriarch of Constantinople functioned as a, like I said, a last court appeal in the past
Yeah.
for specifically
Yeah.
issues pertaining to, like I said, ecclesiastical jurisdiction. Oh, this is my jurisdiction. No, it's not. No, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, and then that was always attempted to be handled in-house, but potentially sometimes it could be appealed to the patriarch.
Right. And
Merely as an administrative issue.
Yeah.
He does not have a divine right to that.
Mm-hmm.
It was a institution which was developed for administrative purposes.
Or he has no divine authority.
He has no divine
beyond any
authority.
other-
It was that position, that role he has, was made by the church to help it function better,
Yeah.
which is, I think, a very different thing than what would be claimed for Pope Francis.
I think in a particular sense, yes. I'm not disagreeing with you.
In a
there.
fundamental sense.
No, in a particular sense. Because ultimately, when you say that the Orthodox, that the head of the Orthodox Church is Christ, yes, the Catholics say the same thing. They're not going to say that the Pope overrides Christ.
No, but
they're saying that the Holy Spirit guides the church.
They would say the vicar, the vicar of Christ on earth is the Pope. There is no singular vicar of Christ on earth in Orthodoxy. There isn't.
Right, but every bishop in some way is persona Christi.
Yes, every bishop in some way, yes.
Yes, and again, that's a difference in degree, not of kind. When you're saying that, where you're saying that the bishops who come from the apostles all represent Christ,
Yes.
to a certain extent, yes, and then when you ask the Catholic Church, who is the head of the church, they're going to say Christ. When they say when the Pope is elected, who elected the Pope? Ultimately, the Holy Spirit guided the church. They're not going to say that just people did. No, they believe that Christ and the Holy Spirit are the ones to protecting and guiding the church.
Right.
And so, again, that there's no difference there in Orthodoxy. The Orthodox are not going to say, no, we elected him to be the... No, you would say that Christ is the head of the church, and the fact that these bishops have this vocation, have this calling, ultimately is guided by the Holy Spirit.
Right.
And that the head of the patriarch, which you would call the first amongst equals or whatever, is one.
Jeremy.
What? No, because I don't. Yes.
I don't think you know how that sounded, but
Oh, I didn't mean it bad.
No.
Yeah, it's just like, what,
I wasn't.
yeah.
no, I
was
just
his
thought that
face.
was funny. I was like, whoa.
is that when you say that, ultimately you're saying that the
Yeah.
Holy Spirit in Christ is the one that is guiding the church
Yeah.
in this way.
Yes.
That's literally the exact same claim of the Catholics. The only difference is that the Orthodox claim is that
We don't have an infallible autocrat at the head of our church.
neither do we. The Pope is very fallible.
No. Infallible in terms of, like I was saying, if the Pope makes a specific pronouncement ex cathedra, that is infallible.
That's a particular difference. That's
That
not
is
a fundamental one.
That is a particular difference.
Yes. And
But
yeah.
that has fundamental ramifications
Yeah,
for what the church is
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
become.
And I have no issue saying that the consequences of
fundamentally different.
certain particular distinctions will be great. Yeah, I think the consequences may be, but fundamentally, they're not. Fundamentally, it is believing in the same thing, but one believes that the authority is particularly different in these instances. Because ultimately, no Catholic believes that the Pope is literally Christ.
Right.
No, I mean, I shouldn't say no Catholic. The Catholic Church does not teach that, right? The Catholic Church does not teach that the Pope is Christ. The Catholic Church does not teach that when he writes an encyclical,
Yeah.
it is doctrine. The Catholic Church does not say when he speaks to CNN, it is doctrine. No.
Thank
The,
God.
the Pope can say many stupid things.
Yeah.
Right.
The people are allowed to disagree with the Pope and remain Catholic.
Yeah.
You can disagree with the Pope with a plethora of things and still remain Catholic. That's he doesn't have this autocratic power like, well, you disagree with him, I guess you're no longer Catholic. No. If the Pope says something nonsensical,
But he
you could
could.
say he is saying nonsensical
But he could, though.
because we believe that Christ guided that. Not because he has the power in himself to do so, but because the Holy Spirit will now not allow him to say a doctrine that is wrong. That's what we believe. Not that the Pope himself carries the power, but the Holy Spirit will not allow the church to err. And I would say probably the Orthodox say the same thing. They believe that the Holy Spirit will not allow the church to err.
Yes.
That's all that ex cathedra means.
Right.
But
But specifically, again, like that authority is
You are correct that
Concentrated.
no patriarch can speak ex cathedra in the same
yes.
way. Yes.
No
That
patriarch
is
can
correct.
speak
Yes,
No patriarch can speak ex cathedra. No patriarch gets to again appoint every bishop in the world. I mean, these are big things.
Or at least veto.
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Because he doesn't actually read every bishop that gets.
right.
Yeah, there's a hierarchy that normally appoints. Like,
But he can step in and go, no.
Yeah.
yes,
He
yeah,
could.
can, yeah,
he
yeah,
could if he wanted to. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So you could be like, no, I don't want this guy. I want someone else. Yes.
yeah, yeah.
So what we're dealing with is a very different institution in terms of the degree of how it operates and the power that it holds.
Yes, which is what Jeremy said.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would say that is one of the fundamentally the big difference. One of the main differences between Orthodoxy and Catholicism is that we believe that at a certain point the Bishop of Rome put himself above everybody else. And basically the impetus for that, there's some speculation, but it is supposed, one of the ideas out there is that it was Frankish interference to basically try and create a power counterweight to the East through basically Charlemagne and the Carolingians. You can disagree with that. That's fine, but that's sort of what we believe. And that it was a power play by the papacy to become, again, autocrat of the church, which we would say he never was.
Well, like Peter always had veto power.
Well,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it was a much smaller institution at that point, I guess, but it was good.
And the early ecumenical councils that everybody partook in was always presided by the Bishop of Rome.
And he had veto power.
Right. Yeah. So even the ones in which both the Orthodox and the Roman Church agree on were presided by the Bishop of Rome. Whether
And he had to okay it.
well, there was also councils too that I can't remember which one it was.
You
But-
can just say one.
Yeah,
I'm not
but I
gonna,
think
I'm
there,
not going to fact check.
there was
anything.
specific.
I don't know anything.
we don't have a
There
J.
there was one where basically it took a while for the Bishop of Rome to sort of get on board.
Yeah.
And there was actually an 8th ecumenical council, the 8th one, which was approved of by the Bishop of Rome and then retroactively rejected by a preceding pope.
Yeah, I think some of them they didn't partake that much, and I think the Council
So-
of Carthage,
Yeah.
the Bishop of
Yeah.
Rome, well, like he was kind of present, but he didn't.
Yeah,
really
he had
run-
like
yeah.
his people there telling him what's
Right,
going
yeah,
on. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there were ones that were other bishops partook in a lot more than he did.
And obviously there have been popes that have been anathematized after their death and stuff.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But they are human.
Yes.
So
Yeah. I think, but as a believer in Orthodox faith, do you guys not believe that? So do you believe that there is a possibility that your church can be in error?
The church as a whole, no.
No, the Orthodox Church, yeah. No.
an autocephalous branch can be.
Well, when you say that, it's not like, so individual people can.
Yeah.
But the thing is that autocephalous branches, at a certain point, if like, I mean, they would just quit being Christian at a certain point. In the same way
Yeah,
that
yeah.
like, Rome had to deal with the Lutherans,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But among all the bishops and whatnot, the faith is sort of maintained. So that is the, I guess I said, sorry. My brain.
Yeah,
I had a brain fart.
no. But basically, I just asked that: do you believe that that your church can be in error?
The church, no. The church
No.
cannot be an error. Because it is guided by the Holy Spirit. As you would say for
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess in principle, I don't see how that's not ex cathedra.
Is it just because
Because
there's
it is
one
not-
figure that isn't?
Yes.
So again, that's just a particular distinction then.
It's the same power.
don't
It's the
know,
same
though.
power
Yeah.
allocated different ways. Is what he's saying. It's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the same power, but it's allocated.
And there's
across
no
the
there's
whole
no
church
there's
Yeah.
instead of concentrated.
Right.
in one guy.
Concentrate on the Pope.
And
right,
no one would say
Yeah.
that these particular differences aren't major.
Yes.
They're major differences.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, they're important differences.
yeah,
I
And
would
there's
say, yes,
also doctrinal issues as well. You know, it's not just the papacy.
Because there
So,
are
like, one of
huge
the-
differences, but
yeah.
So like the papacy, of course, is the most obvious one, but there's also, you know, the filioque, which was added to the creed, and then also the two, or at least one of the ex cathedra statements of the Pope on the Immaculate Conception. Orthodox reject that. So that's like one issue of doctrine where we're like, sorry, we can't agree.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And we would say that that error occurred because of, you know, the issues of the power that the papacy assumed for itself, that it had the, you know, that it took it upon itself to make a statement like this for the whole church. We would say that power cannot resist.
Because it would make sense to me
Yeah.
that the Eastern Orthodox Church would organize itself in such a way as to not repeat a schism of the same nature as the one in 1054. That seems to me what they're trying to avoid is schism at all,
Well,
because it seems harder to schism.
maybe.
It's just the way you're describing it sounds like it would be a harder thing to do because there's not a single body. There is a single body, but it's the way that that's allocated.
Yeah.
Seems like it would be more difficult.
Well, it just seems like the power is distributed more.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
So it would be
that's-
harder to
that's-
declare.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Undeniable.
Yeah. So they have a broader spread of authority. Not that they lack authority, but they just have a wider spread of it. And so that's probably what makes it a little more difficult to
Yes.
to be in schism. But
But yeah, people have gone in schism. I mean, if we look historically, for example, the what do you call them? The Oriental Orthodox.
Yeah.
So those are the Ethiopians, Malankara Orthodox in India, and Armenians. They schismed from the Orthodox Church.
Or
when
they've
it was-
been reaccepted.
when it was in communion with Rome. So
Oh,
this
okay.
is when all Christendom was kind of united, and then you had the churches in, like I said, in Ethiopia, in India, and
Armenia.
schism from Orthodoxy.
Because it was in communion with Rome.
No. This is before 1054. This happened in like the year like 500 something.
So
they-
Armenian Orthodox have been schismatic
For a long time.
for a long, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, they're in schism. Yeah.
Right. But they
So-
were also the first country on earth to declare themselves nationally Catholic.
Yeah. Right. So, but they
Yeah.
so, and things like that, like in the past happened.
Yeah.
I mean, they can happen again today.
It does seem like the organization is a lot more confusing in the Orthodox world.
Yeah, maybe in some ways, but it's kind of more. It's more federated. You can think
Yes,
about it like
that is
that.
very Russian of them.
you're Russian. Yeah.
But I mean, think about it like in terms of like think about Rome as like a unitary state,
Yeah.
like a single guy at the top, whereas like the Orthodox Church is more of a. I'm using like gross political analogies,
Yeah.
but an Orthodox state is more of like a confederation of principalities. So it's like the Holy Roman Empire versus like the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
You know, so you have this authority, and they're all sort of like, you know,
Yeah.
working together. They're unified,
But at a certain point, that
but
stops.
they all have their own
Statistic
Right.
power.
Yeah. Yeah. I
like
mean,
it just sounds like one could just go, nah. And then, I mean, I guess they could do that in the Catholic world too.
Yeah. I mean, if you
I
look
mean,
at it
that's
like,
what.
But
SS
it seems like there's less
that's what-
recourse.
That's what
Yes,
SSPX
yeah.
does.
Yes.
yeah, or like the bishop in.
I'm glad you're on the right side of the issue.
the archbishop in Germany.
Yeah.
I mean, like he's pretty much bordering that kind of.
The
Yeah.
heresy.
Yeah, being schismatic because he's blatantly ignoring Catholic teaching. and he's teaching.
Do
things
Orthodox
that are
view
not-
Catholics as schismatic or heretical?
Both.
Depending.
Yeah. So depending on some of the doctrines would be considered heretical. So I think it would be in schism.
Do Catholics
And-
consider the Orthodox heretical about anything? Well, I
don't know.
I don't think they could because the
I don't
sacraments
think so.
are valid.
Yeah, I don't think they do.
Are the sacraments valid?
Yeah, in cases of emergency, you can go to Orthodox Church and receive
Yeah.
sacraments.
But that was not always the case, though.
I'm sure it wasn't around the time of the schism.
Yeah, I think when the schism was hot, it wasn't.
Because I know that the attitudes of Rome towards the Orthodox Church have warmed up a lot in like the past
200 years or so.
Yeah, 200
Yeah.
years or so.
Yeah.
Which again, changing doctrine. But I'm just
Yeah.
messing with you guys.
No, I know. Yeah, you're good.
But
No, yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah, I was just curious. I don't. I feel like the more I learn about it, the less I understand it. Orthodoxy.
Yeah.
The less I can picture what it is, because it's not just Russian Catholicism.
No, yeah,
It's
yeah,
not.
yeah,
But the more I learn about it, the more I realize I don't know what it is.
yeah.
it is different. I will say that.
But it's also the same in a lot of ways.
it is.
But I can't tell
It is-
how
it is-
the same
so,
it is.
I mean, like, let's just run down the list.
Yeah.
Similarities, apostolic succession,
Exact same concept of God.
or very similar at least. I mean,
I
again,
don't know if there's any.
we could quibble about essence energies distinction,
I
but
think-
I'm
I
not
think
going
it's
to
the same
do
thing as
that.
we say in different
Yeah.
words, but
Yeah,
we've talked about
and
it.
the
We
thing
don't-
is too is like,
Yeah.
I know some Catholics apparently have like different conceptions about what that is. So
Yeah, but I think what's important is the actual church teaching,
yeah.
right? And in terms of the actual church, because we could always
So
find
the actual,
Catholics.
so the actual church teaching, as I understand it, is the Thomistic understanding is the concept of absolute divine simplicity, right?
No. The term absolute divine simplicity was created by the East. The West actually never ever used that term.
But what they mean by absolute divine simplicity exists in Thomism.
No.
So that God is one simple essence.
That there is no distinction between his being and essence.
Okay.
Yeah. Not that there is no radiation of his activities that are distinct. And so and so that
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So sorry.
Yeah.
Wine brain. So okay. So I think that if I understand correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy.
Yeah.
But as I understand it, the Catholic understanding is that God's actions and his essence are connected.
Yes. What God is and how God is
Or the same.
are identical to each other. Yes. But
The
not
Orthodox would
right.
say what God is and how he acts in the world are, in a sense, different.
Yes, and again, the Catholic would say that. That's to say the emanations of his actions are distinct. His creation is not the same as him.
Yes.
The creation, we are not God,
Right.
because his actions are distinct from him. But that he acts and what he is are identical to himself. And so
So what he acts and how he is are identical to himself. So what God
that he is, and how he is are identical to itself. Yes.
that he is and how he is.
As the pure act of being, it would have.
Yes. Yeah.
So explain that to me.
So yeah. So yeah.
I need to stop drinking this damn wine.
No, it's fine. No, it just means that there is no composition to God. God as being altogether simple, as Aquinas would say, means that we as composite creatures have form and matter. We have two distinct qualities about ourselves that come together as one substance. We're saying that God is not a substance because God has no form and matter that come together.
Yes.
And so that God is identical to what God is and how he exists as being pure act. And so there will be no composition found in God. So there's no body in God. There is no multiplicity in God, and so on and so forth. And yeah,
But the act is purest, the pure act thing, I think is something that, again, might take issue with because God could also have chosen not to act, in which case he couldn't be pure act because he has free choice to like decide how he wants to operate in reality.
God doesn't choose.
right. I mean, God would be pure motion. And at least from what I read in Orthodoxy does not believe
And I
that God
think-
has an option to not exist.
And I think that's sort of the difference is that so God is pure act with no unactualized potential.
Yeah, without potency.
Yeah.
At all.
Okay. Okay. Ha. Okay. I think
Yeah.
I came down to it. So the disagreement there is the Orthodox would say that is true in and of himself,
Yes.
but how he chooses to exercise his energy is a different phenomenon, and creation is not a necessary cause of God acting out because he has to. Does that kind of make sense?
I wouldn't say we disagree.
Yeah.
So
Because we don't think that God needed to create us. We're not necessary. We're contingent beings. So there's nothing
but if
necessary
he
in our
is
existence.
pure act without unactualized potential, wouldn't he need to create us?
It just means that he is.
This means that he did.
He is that he is.
So
Like Etienne Gilson says, to
so
be
the
God's to be to be.
creation is inevitable then. So this reality
No,
had to be.
not this reality. It has to be
Because-
the way that it is. No.
If he is pure act and he had to, and he has no unactualized potential, that necessitates that this reality is the only one that could exist.
It's the only one that does.
It's the only one that does. Yeah.
Right.
That
And
does.
we would say
Yeah.
it is the only one that does. Sorry. It is the only one that does, but it could have been something else.
Well, yeah. It could have been something else.
Yeah. It could be because since we're a composite, there are many ways that we could be.
Yeah.
But that God is in himself. Because the claim of divine simplicity is not about the effects of God's existence. It's simply a claim of what God is in himself. And so the effects of God's existence are different. And again, now the Orthodox is going to label that as his energies. The Western Church doesn't have a precise terminology for that, but the definite description is identical. Yeah.
See, I remember listening to a lecture by some Orthodox philosopher in like Pennsylvania or something.
Yeah.
I think you told me about that. You,
And he
you found
made-
his name for me.
Yeah, he would be a much better person
Would
to
you-
have
would
to
you-
Yeah.
discuss this than
Would
me.
you be willing to find that name again? And
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
I can
I
find
could-
that lecture.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you guys could hash out like divine
Yeah.
simplicity or whatnot because
Yeah.
I am not.
No, I did look that up when he gave
Ready.
you the name.
I am not
because you
ready
told
for
me
that
it too.
conversation.
Did I?
Yeah.
Would you? Could we? Find, I would be interested.
Yeah, yeah.
'cause I don't know if I ever listened.
It
Yeah.
is an interesting discussion, but again, the distinctions aren't from the video that I watched anyways. The distinctions aren't again really fundamental.
It's different wording.
It's different wording for meaning the same thing. And that's what I've noticed from most of the differences. It's the same thing even with Immaculate Conception, because the Orthodox have a different conception
Of original
of
sin.
original sin. And so not that they disagree with the existence of original sin, but they don't believe in the guilt of original sin, which is different, which is more of St. John Chrysostom as they attribute it rather than Augustinian. And because they don't believe in the stain of original sin, what they're saying is that we're born into a world of sin rather than we are born inherently with sin in ourselves. So this is why the Orthodox Church never had issues with weird theories in the Middle Ages that the Western did, because the Western Church had to maybe think of limbo, they'll think of different ways to understand what happens if you're not baptized. And that was only a Western problem because the Western world, I believe for many years was not really clear on what original sin meant. Like what does the stain really mean? while I think the Eastern Church never had that issue philosophically.
I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that in the West they just didn't have access to Greek, because that's all this.
I
Shit
think
was-
that's a
all
lot
this,
of- yeah,
All this
yeah.
shit was written down in Greek.
Yes, yeah, and I do agree with you. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think there was an issue with a lot of their understanding of it, which I think was developed further on.
Yeah.
Even before the schism, I think they developed on more with this comprehension, with a deeper comprehension of original sin, and so the issue lies then. And I've spoken to I forgot his name, but I could find him in a podcast because he was on what's on Matt Fradd's. I actually met him because he was my friend's priest, because my friend is a Eastern Catholic, and so I had a really good discussion with him with this, and he actually said he wanted to come on this podcast. He has his own podcast and everything, but
I'll have to fly to Anchorage. But
Wait, you found a guest to be on the podcast and you never said anything or never?
yeah,
When was this?
years ago.
Really?
Yeah,
Like, no, that he agreed to come on the
like,
show
"No,
years
yeah,
ago?
yeah.
How could
It
you?
was,
Years
when we
ago?
first started. I went to a wedding out in Colorado.
Do you have contact information for him?
Yeah,
Why did you?
I
Okay.
don't know. It just fell through. I didn't
Fell
really-
through. Does
Yeah,
he
it's-
hate you now?
No,
You
of
just
course not.
didn't follow up.
Yeah, I didn't follow
Okay,
up.
so
yeah.
follow up now.
Yeah. but I thought that was a really interesting discussion because without
I
understanding,
want him to explain to me why Eastern Catholics exist.
yes, yeah, he would.
Yeah, so email him or
Yeah.
something. I'm going to bother you about this every day
Okay,
until
fine,
you do
yes,
it.
I will. But yeah, the way that he described it, because we have to remember that the Eastern Catholics have the same understanding as the Orthodox do in terms of original sin. There is no distinction, and they also have the same issue with the filioque. And so these aren't qualities that the Eastern Catholics say are fundamental for them to reject the church. And,
So it's
yeah.
just
The filioque is
submit to the
elective, isn't
Pope,
it?
Yes, essentially the main
Literally that.
yeah, the main difference between the
See,
Orthodox
except
and
here's the issue though,
yeah.
and this is why I'm skeptical of that.
Yeah.
So if you were in a Roman Catholic church and then you started saying we're taking the filioque out of the creed
Yeah.
and we're not going to do Immaculate Conception and we don't believe in the veneration of the Sacred Heart, you would be excommunicated.
Yeah.
No, because
Eventually,
the Eastern Catholic Church don't.
yeah. I would say, and if you look, certainly historically, I would say, and it might be like more not
Yeah,
nowadays, just because, I mean, like you say, what's going on in Germany. But basically, in the historic understanding of what Catholicism was, that would be heresy.
No, they normally ask for further explanation.
But
Like-
it would be,
like-
it
like
would
a-
be
like-
heretical. It'd be like the filioque.
Potentially heretical.
It could be potentially, but
There's
even
always a
but you
process.
see what I
yeah,
mean.
yeah. There's
like
there's
Eckert
yeah,
defended
like Meister
his-
Eckhart
yeah.
had to defend many of his claims where he talked about the Godhead and everything,
Yeah.
because ultimately what they care about in every single scenario is the definite description, not the terms. And so when you say, and let me explain the Immaculate Conception, because I found this very, very interesting, because if you don't believe that people are born with inherent sin, where they're not born with guilt and with guilt, rather they're born into a world of guilt, then the Eastern Church believes that Mary was not born in sin, plain and simple, because nobody was.
immaculately conceived.
Yes.
That would just mean everybody's immaculately
Yes, I mean that means everybody
But
is
that's
born
not
without
what
sin.
the Roman Church teaches.
The Roman Church teaches that the Immaculate Conception, all it means, the definite description, is that Mary is born without sin. That is what Immaculate Conception means. And so if the Eastern Catholic says, yes, I believe that Mary was born without sin,
because everybody
because
is.
I believe that everybody's born without sin, and then that still falls in
It's
line
still
with
Immaculate
the
Conception,
definite
yeah.
description does not change. This is why the Catholic Church does not deem them heretical, because okay, yeah, then we actually are in agreement here. Now, for those Westerners who think that people are born in sin, you can't at least
the reason
you cannot
So-
believe that Mary was born in sin.
But the stain of original sin, as I understand it,
Yeah,
was a developed doctrine by the Catholic Church to necessitate Christ being born into a perfect vessel, partially.
It was Augustinian. The way that we understand it was Augustinian. So both St. John Chrysostom and Augustine speak of original sin. But the conception of what that means was different between those two. The Western adopted the Augustinian view, and the Eastern Church adopted the Chrysostom view.
Right.
And
they're
that's
different.
Yes, they're different in that one believes that one is born with inherent guilt, and the other one believes you're not born with a guilt. You're born into a world that has fallen.
So I don't see how you could reconcile the Eastern Catholics with Roman Catholicism then, if that's the case, because you just described two different things.
Because ultimately, what's important, if you read the Catechism, what's important in there, it does not lay out that you have to believe in the Augustinian view. It simply says that you have to believe that there's original sin, and that we are born into it.
And
Except
you're born
for
into
Mary.
it either way.
You're born into it
No,
either way, yeah. But if you begin to interpret that as guilt, you cannot believe that Mary was born without guilt. But if you interpret it as being born into a fallen world,
But there is one
yeah.
reality, regardless of how it's interpreted, right?
Yes, and
But
right
we
now,
can't know.
And the reality is what?
right now, the church there's many teachings of the church.
The
say-
reality
yeah.
that the church teaches, as I say,
Mm-hmm.
as I understand it,
Yeah.
is that the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception is that Mary was created as a specific vessel free from the stain of original sin,
Yes.
unlike other human beings.
Yes,
The
but
Western church.
But the second part is not necessary.
Yeah.
Unlike other human beings,
what's
is
necess-
necessary because
No,
that is
what's-
part of the doctrine, right?
What's necessary is that Mary was born without original sin, without the stain of original sin. That's the important part. The other part is consequential, in that if we are born with guilt, Mary could not have been born that way. And so so it's a conditional claim, basically. As a conditional claim, the antecedent is that if you agree with this, the other part cannot be true. However, if one comes into it with because both of them are saints in the Catholic Church, both of them are doctors in the Catholic Church.
Who is both?
St. John Chrysostom and St. Augustine. Right. All right, so the church does not deny either of their teachings. At this point, they're suspending judgment on who is correct. But there has to be original sin.
But
that's the thing, yeah.
But didn't they, by basically making a statement about the original sin
Mm-hmm.
doctrine with Mary, because the ancestral,
Yeah.
as I understand it, the ancestral sin claim of St. John Chrysostom is that man is born with a fallen nature
Yes.
and can commit sin. Whereas the Augustinian idea is that that's true, and you are also born with guilt. The Immaculate Conception basically takes away the guilt and also the potential for Mary to have been sinful.
Yes. That Mary was without sin.
Yeah.
That she was not born with original sin and ultimately did not sin.
Yes. And could have, and could be none other than she was as God created her.
No, just that she is that. The church rarely ever makes claims of possible worlds. It's always claims of what is. Not what could have been, because what could have been is not really important in a...
She didn't inherit the fallen nature, is what I'm saying. And that's kind of the big thing.
Yeah, she did not. She did not inherit it. Again, it's a conditional claim. If P, then Q. If you believe this, then this. So if you believe that original sin means that you're born with this inherent guilt, then it cannot be the case that Mary...
It's not worded as she was born this way there, or
right,
it doesn't say
yeah.
original sin is this because of this. It says
Right.
if this, then this.
Because since the church suspends judgment on whose interpretation is correct...
Doesn't the church, like...
It
if
was
you
a
read, like,
clarification of doctrine.
It was, yeah.
But if you
essentially,
read,
yeah.
like, what's that word? What's that book called?
I'm just filling dead air with,
There's a word with it. I'm sorry. I can't remember. But anyways, isn't there like a collection of doctrine about like what these things means?
Yeah, there's a catechism. There's writings of the official teachings of the church, and if you look up original sin in the church, the only thing it talks about is a stain, but it doesn't talk about what that stain means.
The stain could be that you're born into a fallen world at all.
Yes,
it could be that you have it.
I don't know. Sounds like cope to me. Sorry.
No, I don't know what you mean by it sounds like cope. It's just that the church for throughout history suspended judgment on teachings. For even until now, it still does.
I don't know, man. It's just,
It has always until it has further development. It is, and I do think that's another difference. And like, if there is a fundamental distinction between the Orthodox and the Catholics, is that the Catholics really do believe in the living church. They believe that things are always in a constant development. They don't more so than I would say the Orthodox are more stagnant in their belief, and they claim that things static. Yeah, they're static in their belief. In that, why is stagnant sound mean? Okay, they're static.
I'm curbing your
it's okay.
your connotation. No,
yes.
I know.
Yeah, they're static in their belief. In that's why they're called Orthodox. Essentially, because
belief.
That is not changing.
Yeah.
And so the Western Church, the Catholic Church, really does believe in the living church. And so there's many claims that they have made originally that say they suspend judgment on until further investigation. And the further they investigate things, further revelation that they can make a stronger claim on, and then they do. They did the same thing with capital punishment right now.
Yeah, but
and so it's. But
the problem is then when you have, I guess, sort of blatant contradictions, is when I would say.
Where
I know, but where's the contradiction?
So, like for example, the Church teaches the Pope and this is pre-Vatican I, by the way.
Yeah.
So, is it an ex-cathedra statement or not? I don't know.
Yeah.
Nobody can tell me.
Yeah.
that execution, the death penalty, is a part of natural law. It is moral and it is good, and you should do it.
Can be.
They never said it was good, but yeah.
Yeah.
No, they said it's permissible, never good. Yeah.
And now
it's impermissible.
It's
impermissible.
Yeah.
Because we have the means.
So we have literally changing a moral doctrine.
No.
A permissibility of a thing.
And also, we also have the other aspect where you have Orthodox or, heretics who are, none who are not within, none who are not within communion with the Holy See can be saved. That was like an explicit doctrine of the church. But apparently now it's like, maybe not. I mean, these are like pretty significant things, like doctrinal changes, you might say.
Well, they're practical changes. They're not doctrinal.
Yeah.
I don't know. They seem pretty doctrinal.
The murder, the capital punishment wasn't. It's not a doctrinal thing.
Right, because they never change a moral claim.
But if you have the church teaching that you people are going to hell, and then later it's like, okay, you people aren't going to hell. I mean, that's a pretty big shift, right?
I mean, you would have to show me the actual doctrine, because I honestly don't know what you're speaking of. I have never seen a doctrine that says that they're going to hell. You could say that there's popes that made strong claims, fine, but that's not doctrine. There's popes that made many strong claims that were false.
But if it's a teaching directed to the whole church, and it is accepted by everybody at the time, more or less,
it's not about consensus.
Is that not a matter of doctrine?
No, the church is not a democracy. They don't care about consensus. It doesn't matter whether 90%
so it could teach the wrong thing for hundreds of years and then teach the right thing.
There were many bishops. I think there was like 50% of the bishops who were part of the Arian heresy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And I'm not saying that a minority can exist, but what I'm saying is that when you have a situation where
that wasn't just a minority, that was 50%.
Yeah, no, it was a significant
plurality.
A plurality. Yeah. But so yes, I would agree
that doesn't have bearing on church teaching.
I would agree that as a matter of course, whether one person believes it or the whole world believes it, what's true is true, right?
Yeah.
Truth exists beyond like how many people buy into it or not. But I guess my issue is that if I look at, again, sort of the history of Catholicism, sort of what it has taught, it does seem to change quite a bit. And what you call the living church, I call wishy-washy. Now, the manifestations of how Orthodoxy exists in different cultures and at different times does change. If you look at a Western Rite church in the United States, it is very similar to like a Tridentine Mass, but just again with like some tweaks on it to make it Orthodox. Or if you go to like an all English service, or if you go to like one in Romania or whatever, these are all going to be very different, and they're going to have differences, and some of them are going to change a little bit over time to adapt to the specific culture of the area. And I see that as being that as sort of being the more living church in the sense
Catholics do that too.
Yeah,
Right,
and I understand that.
No.
But what it is that these fundamental things of pretty big importance, like no creature can be saved unless it be, in communion of Rome, which was, a teaching of the Catholic Church for quite some time. It's not now, apparently. I mean, you don't see
again, I don't
seesaws like that.
I don't
in
think that
Orthodoxy,
I
and
don't
that's
think that was a
big deal.
teaching of the church, though. You can't make a claim that maybe a pope made and say that was a teaching of the church. There's
But
many
was it in-
claims.
but-
There's many claims that popes have made. There's many claims that bishops have made.
I
There are
understand
many
that.
claims that bishops in the Eastern Church have made, or the Orthodox churches have
Right.
made. And so that doesn't mean that that's the Orthodox teaching. Doesn't mean that now this is what the Orthodox believe. No,
understand that.
they can make many claims that are maybe harsher than necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've had like heretical bishops, and like bishops can make mistakes and whatnot. We would certainly not disagree with that. But the fact is that I see an inconsistency in doctrine over time. And you guys, I know you disagree with me and whatever, but I'm just saying that's what I see.
Would you be interested in analyzing something sometime?
Yeah.
Because I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
I'd be interested in finding the source material for those,
Yeah.
and
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
if we ever want to do a second.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying yourself, I don't
No,
know.
I am.
What time is it?
We've
Late.
recorded 3 hours so far.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's proper Rogan status.
Yeah.
Should we
Sure.
to be continued?
Yeah.
Is it like 12:30 or something?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. 12:30 a.m.
So we started the stream with Hunger Strike. What are we going to close it with?
We'll see. We'll see if we just hunger
I'm
strike
going
again.
hungry.
Hunger strike in the Ukraine
Hunger Strike in
Yes.
the UK.
Yeah.
Anarchy in the UK.
with
Hunger Strike in the
Mr. with
Ukraine.
Mr. Patriarch. Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Yeah,
A long
well,
time coming.
Well, you're our only local guest
That's
with,
right.
with any online presence.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, your mom was on. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess
yeah.
I guess you could put that in.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
reconvene. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, I'd love to do this again. This was fun.
Yeah. We'll figure it out. Anyway, I guess we'll talk to you later.
Yes.
Okay. Bye.
Dynamite.
I gotta let it go a little bit.
Oh.
Do you have it pulled up still?
No.
No.
I haven't had my phone out. Miraculous.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the car.
Yeah, we left it in the road for you.
Yeah, we left it
No,
in the
I
road,
got my
Jeremy.
truck
We
right
were
out
gonna
there.
we were gonna taxi you across the road.
Yeah. Oh.
That was fun, man. Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, I wasn't sure what the show was going to be. I didn't know if Grant.
it was gonna be a Catholic Orthodox.
I didn't know.
That was